Director of High Impact Innovation and Research at Universitas Indonesia. Gentlemen, please rise as we begin the opening ceremony with the national anthem of the Republic of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya. You may now be seated.
Indonesia. From the heart of Equator, 17,000 islands, 1,340 ethnic groups, 1,211 local languages. This is Indonesia, a living constellation of cultures. From the heart of the archipelago, Indonesia speaks through culture, color, and collective memory, a living heritage that shapes tomorrow. Woven not just with threads, but with meaning. Our fabric speaks the soul of the land. In every motif carved by hand, in each story expressed across generations, Indonesian culture pulses with wisdom, rooted in nature and alive in community. Our traditional textiles are not just fashion, they are philosophies. Sustainably dyed, thoughtfully woven, carrying the ethics of balance, dignity, and identity. In times of crisis, we return to what is essential, from games that teach solidarity to jamu, the herbal remedies that heal, from sacred rituals to craftsmanship that empowers. Indonesia's local knowledge offers the global insight. The pulse of our culture beats strongest in the hands of the young. They remix gamelan with electronic beats, translate ancient stories into cinema, and redefine tradition not by forgetting, but by reimagining. This is innovation grounded in identity, is not just expressive, but transformative. Our culture born from diversity, tested by history, and renewed by each generation. As the world seeks new ways to live, Indonesian diverse culture brings solution. Resilient, regenerative, and radiant. Culture is not what we leave behind. It is what moves us forward. Culture that heals, unites, and inspires. This is Indonesia's offering to the world. This is culture for future.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Blessings upon all of you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day one of the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy, Iiccd 2025. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Romi Sianturi, and it is an immense pleasure to be your host for this year's conference. Here at Iiccd 2025, ladies and gentlemen, we are gathering to explore the cultural richness of the world, especially Indonesia's, and how it continues to shape diplomacy and global affairs in so many beautiful and meaningful ways. In this year's conference, we are honored to be joined by our distinguished invitees. First, we are graced by the presence of His Excellency Dr. Fadlizon MSc, Minister of Culture of the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome, Your Excellency. We are on behalf of Director of Universitas Indonesia. We have Bapak Khairul Hudaya PhD, Director of High Impact Innovation and Research, Universitas Indonesia. Please also welcome Ibu Endah Reno Astuti, SSM Phil, Director General of Diplomacy, Promotion and Cooperation, Ministry of Culture of the Republic of Indonesia. Ibu Dwi Ardana Riswari Sundrijo, PhD, Acting Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia. Excellencies, ambassadors of our friendly countries, our esteemed speakers, panelists, and presenters, and of course, all of you participants joining us today at Iiccd 2025. Let's give ourselves a big round of applause. Thank you, that's a great energy. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our agenda today, I invite all of us to pause for a moment of silence and prayer. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. May this moment of prayer guide today's events. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, we will now officially begin Iiccd 2025 with our welcoming remarks. To deliver his address, it is our distinct privilege to invite Bapak Khairul Hudaya, PhD, Director of High Impact Innovation and Research, Universitas Indonesia.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin reading the official remark from the Rector of Universitas Indonesia, I would like to convey a sincere gratitude from our Rector, Professor Heri Hermansyah, for not being able to join us in person today. So really sorry for that one, Pak Menteri. And he entrusted me to deliver his message on this very important conference. Therefore, it is an honor for me to stand here on his behalf, and I hope I can convey his thought and aspiration for you. With that, let me proceed for the opening speech from Rector of Universitas Indonesia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. His Excellency, Minister of Culture of the Republic of Indonesia, our esteemed alumni, Dr. Fadli Zon. Let me big applause to Dr. Fadli Zon. Vice Chairperson of Commission 10, the Indonesian House of Representatives, Honorable Ibu Himatul Alia, or her representative here. His Excellencies, Ambassador of friendly countries. Here today we have 73 participants from Indonesia, 2 from Italy. Would you please raise hand from Italy? Oh yeah, please big applause. 1 for Portugal. Where is from Portugal? Is there here? Okay. And 1 from San Marino, 1 from India, and 1 from Kenya. Okay, thank you for attending this conference. And also we have foreign national speakers, 1 from Singapore. Are you already here? Thanks so much, sir. And 1 from Portugal. Hello, yes, thank you. 1 from Australia. And thank you. And UEA. And Germany, Kenya, I think, madam, and also from Ukraine. Okay. So we have here also the VVIP guests. His Excellency, Ambassador from Uruguay, Belarusia, Netherlands, Serbia, Somalia, Ukraine, and also Minister or Counselor or Attaché from Malaysia, Brunei, Philippines, Turkey, Tanzania, and Sudan. So thank you so much for. It is my great honor to welcome you to the Indonesia International Conference on Culture Diplomacy 2025, co-hosted by Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, and the Indonesia Ministry of Culture. We gather today at this very critical moment. Culture is no longer a peripheral element of diplomacy, but a central language through which nations understand each other. Culture carries stories, memories, and identities across borders. Diplomacy gives those stories direction. And when culture and diplomacy meet, they create a form of engagement that is deeply human. Cooperation shaped not only by interest, but by empathy, curiosity, and shared aspiration. I believe this is the most important aspect of cultural diplomacy. Its ability to connect people before it connects policies. Universitas Indonesia, as an academic institution, sees its role not merely as a producer of knowledge, but as a space where ideas can question power, illuminate complexity, and inspire better choices. Academia must guide cultural diplomacy with rigorous research, critical perspective, and commitment to inclusivity. Scholars have the responsibility to examine whose voice are amplified, whose heritage is protected, and whose stories cross borders. In doing so, we help ensure that cultural diplomacy is not only strategic, but also ethical and just. I am proud that Iiccd 2025 embodies this vision. This conference brings together diverse actors to rethink cultural diplomacy in a changing world. It encourages us to look beyond familiar narratives, recognize marginalized perspectives, and explore how cultural practices, old and new, can contribute to peace, mutual understanding, and sustainable development. I hope that over the next 2 days, we will not only exchange the arguments, but also build a good relationship. Diplomacy begins with dialogues, and dialogue begins with trust. Let us use this platform to weave new understanding, strengthen cooperations, and imagine a future where culture enriches global peace, sustainability, and shared prosperity. On behalf of Universitas Indonesia, as I wish you a fruitful and inspiring conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hairul Hudaya, for your very inspiring, welcoming remarks. Next, ladies and gentlemen, to deliver his opening remarks and officially start the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy 2025, it is an immense honor to welcome His Excellency, the Minister of Culture of the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Fadlizon, MSc.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, good morning, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Rahayu. Excellencies, ambassadors of friendly countries, member of diplomatic corps and representatives of international institutions, yang saya hormati Bapak Hairul Hudaya, mewakili Rektor Universitas Indonesia, Profesor Dr. Semiarto Aji Purwanto, Dekan Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Indonesia, FISIP, distinguished professors, scholars, researchers, students, esteemed delegates, cultural practitioners and artists. I'm here also with the Director General of Promotion, Cooperation and Cultural Diplomacy, and also the special expert from the Ministry of Culture, Budita, who is also from this institution. So it's truly an honor to stand before you at the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy, CCD 2025, especially here at my alma mater, the University of Indonesia, a place that has long served as a hub for critical thinking, dialogue, creativity, and innovation. Allow me to express my deepest appreciation to the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, our FISIP UI, the Director General of Diplomacy, Promotion and Cooperation of the Ministry of Culture, and to all scholars, policymakers, artists, and partners who have worked tirelessly to make this forum possible, building on the spirit of defining cultural diplomacy, crossing cultures, weaving worlds. Iiccd invites us to pause and reflect on how culture has shaped and continues to shape international relations and diplomacy, and to reaffirm our collective commitment to advancing culture as a vital force within the fabric of global civilization. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we gather at a time when the global landscape is marked by profound transformations, intensifying geopolitical tensions, rapid technological disruption, deep inequalities, and pressing climate crisis. In such a world, cultural diplomacy should not be a peripheral gesture. It is increasingly central on how nations understand each other, strengthen relations among people, build trust, and imagine a shared future. There's also growing recognition that cultural diplomacy forms an essential part of what Joseph Nye describes as soft power. At the same time, we should acknowledge that there might be no single, universally accepted definition of cultural diplomacy. Across disciplines and institutions, it intersects with public diplomacy, nation branding, cultural promotion, and even cultural industries. This conference exists precisely because we need to examine these ideas with greater precision, question our assumptions, and articulate the conceptual, practical foundations of cultural diplomacy for our time. To clarify what we hope to achieve, and when we speak of cultural diplomacy in the 21st century, beyond a reflection of the past, culture is a living force with the power to shape a prosperous and sustainable future. It is a living spirit that connects nations and communities, opening pathways for peace and cooperation. In Indonesian context, we put culture as a binding power that strengthens social cohesion, a profound source of identity that shapes our national character, an engine of growth driving economic potential, innovation, and prosperity, and a strategic instrument of diplomacy. I would like to bring forward two key narratives that frame Indonesia's cultural position in the world. First, it is no longer sufficient to describe Indonesia as a diverse country. It is a mega diverse country. Yeah. We are home to 1,340 ethnic groups and more than 718 languages, more than 1,000 local languages, representing 10% of the world's languages. We have recorded 2,727 elements of National Intangible Cultural Heritage, ICH, with an estimated 30,000 potential cultural elements. 16 of them, 16 ICH elements, have been inscribed by UNESCO, including keris, wayang, angklung, gamelan, and the last one is kebaya, reok ponorogo, and many other things. I think you can see on the screen. We also have 228 national cultural heritage sites, which will increase around 80 this year, with 6 World Cultural Heritage Sites recognized by UNESCO. The second narrative, Indonesia as one of the oldest civilizations on earth. In Sulawesi's Leang Karampuang cave, we find the world's oldest narrative painting of 51,200 years old. Nearly 60% of the world's Homo erectus fossils have been found in our archipelago, especially on the island of Java, preserving traces that go back around 2 million years old. And last month, our cultural diplomacy succeeded in repatriating 28,131 Dubois collection fossils from the Netherlands, including the Java man, the original Homo erectus findings from Trinil, East Java. Over 2,300 objects have been returned from the Netherlands, with ongoing negotiation with the UK, United States, Germany, Belgium, Japan, and India. In Flores, the discovery of Homo floresiensis shows that early humans already reached deep Wallacea terrain, accessible only through the open sea. In West Sumatra, at Lidah Air Cave, atau Gua Lidah Air, Fossils show Homo sapiens lived in dense tropical rainforests more than 60,000 years ago. And within the Liang Kabori karst of Muna, cave art depicts boats and hunts from vessels, showing sea voyager communities. For decades, the out of Africa theory has been a dominant narrative in the dispersal and adaptation of early humankind. Today, archaeological and paleoanthropological evidence invites us to consider additional hypotheses, including out of Asia, and even I introduce out of Nusantara, where humans learn to navigate across the sea. It suggests that the movement of early humans was not a one-way route, but a web of crossings through multi-regional migration, where Asia and Nusantara stand as critical axes of world civilization. These findings anchor Indonesia's unique place in the world and provide a strategic foundation for our cultural diplomacy. Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, our 1945 Constitution mandates the advancement of national culture amid the world civilization. This is a foundation that inherently aligns with the mission of cultural diplomacy. In line with this vision, the Ministry of Culture has developed priority policies. First, protection and revitalization of cultural heritage, including conservation of sites, museums, intangible heritage, cultural IP, as well as protection of indigenous and local communities. Second, cultural development, utilization, and empowerment, integrating cultural industries with digital technology, strengthening our film, music, arts, and other cultural ecosystems. And third, cultural diplomacy, promotion, and cooperation, strengthening partnerships through cultural exchange programs, residencies, co-production, gastro-diplomacy, bilateral and regional engagement, and repatriation. In the face of today's global challenges, culture remains an important source of resilience and an essential pillar of soft power. It can transcend the boundaries of language and politics, one that speaks directly to the human soul, opens new pathways for dialogue and cooperation, drives sustainable development, and be a bridge for peace and stability. From wayang, gamelan, and batik, to the movies, animation, and music, every cultural expression is a form of living diplomacy. Beyond the form of diplomacy, our cultural heritage, individually and collectively, also represents immense potential that adds economic value, driving the cultural and creative industries, or CCIs. Within the CCIs, we are enriched by music, film, textiles, IPs, digital content, and other creative expressions, carrying their own unique identity, the driving force for national development. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, delegates, the Iiccd stands as intellectual laboratory where we translate theory into practice and policy into tangible results. We are proud to support this conference as part of a wider ecosystem of initiatives alongside the Candi Summit. Candi Summit we held last September stands for Culture, Heritage, Art, Narrative, Diplomacy, and Innovation. And then just last week, we concluded the Indonesia Pacific Cultural Synergy, or IPACS, in Kupang, and also our ongoing works with universities and international partners. This is a vital platform to reimagine cultural diplomacy through local experiences and the shifting dynamics of our global landscape, and foster meaningful collaboration among institutions, scholars, communities, and policymakers to promote shared progress. Over the next 2 days, I hope we can bring forward essential discussion on issues central in our agenda, such as repatriation, sustainability, maritime heritage, museums, music, pop culture, creative exchange, and media and motion. The Ministry of Culture is keen to learn from your debates, research, proposals, and yielding policy recommendation to strengthen our collective work. Once again, thank you to all partners and participants. May this forum strengthen our resolve to place culture at the heart of dialogue, cooperation, and global progress. Thank you. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I kindly invite you to remain on stage as we proceed with the exchange of tokens of appreciation. At this moment, I would like to also invite Bapak Khairul Hudaya, PhD, to receive his token of appreciation on behalf of Universitas Indonesia as a collaborating partner for Iiccd 2025. His Excellency will be handing over tokens of appreciation. Picture in 3, 2, 1. We then invite Bapak Khairul Hudaya to hand over a token of appreciation on behalf of Universitas Indonesia to His Excellency Dr. Fadlizon. Photo in 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. We will now proceed with a group photo with... Okay, another token of appreciation handed over by our main collaborators for the Iiccd 2025. Thank you. We will now proceed with a group photo with all the participants. Your Excellency Dr. Fadlizon and Bapak Khairul Hudaya, please kindly step down from the stage and move to the floor area so we can take pictures with all of our participants now. Ladies and gentlemen, you may stand up so we can all fit in the group picture. If we may, ladies and gentlemen, move a little bit to the center so everyone can fit in the picture. I will be guiding the picture. In 3, 2, 1. Share your best smile. In 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You may now return back to your seats. To our distinguished invitees, thank you so much for your gracious presence. You may now leave the auditorium, if you will, to proceed to your next agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, with the Iiccd officially opened with the welcoming remarks, it is time for us to get into the main agenda of Day 1, starting with the plenary Session 1, Cultural Policy as the Baseline for Cultural Diplomacy. First to deliver his keynote speech for this plenary session is Professor Semiarto Aji Purwanto, Professor of Anthropology at Universitas Indonesia. Professor Aji, the floor is yours.
Selamat pagi teman-teman semua. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning ladies and gentlemen. Excellencies, ambassadors from friendly countries as well as the distinguished diplomats. Oh, I'm sorry. Minister of Culture is still here. Thank you very much, Dr. Fadlizon. And also the Director General of Cultural Diplomacy, Promotion and Cooperations, the high ranks officials from the Minister of Culture, representative from the Universitas Indonesia, all distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your coming here. And today I will deliver my speech on rethinking Indonesia's cultural diplomacies from heritage display to policies and community power. So we gather today in a world where political narratives are no longer sufficient to bridge the widening divides between nations. In moments of tensions and uncertainty, it is culture, its stories, like the minister has already mentioned, emotions and shared humanity that often become the first language through which dialogue responds. Cultural diplomacy, therefore, has moved from the margins to the very center of international relations. Again, the representative from the Universitas Indonesia has already emphasized these issues. And across the globe, states increasingly rely on cultural symbols to communicate values and aspirations. Culture humanizes diplomacy, it softens boundaries and builds trust. Yet, Indonesia's approach to cultural diplomacy at times remains more reactive than strategic. When neighboring countries claim elements of shared heritage, for example, our response tends to erupt to emotional defensiveness rather than calm narrative clarity. One best example is how we, the lay people in Indonesia, respond when, for example, the neighboring countries such as Malaysia claim tradition that Indonesia perceives as ours, such as reok, batik, pencaksilat, or gasing. The public discourse typically erupts in outrage, assuming cultural theft, whereas from my point of view as an anthropologist, shared cultures expression across the archipelago and the Malay Peninsula are natural outcomes of centuries of migration, trades, and kinship. Instead of strategic engagement, we tend to respond defensively and wisely. This reaction deeply reflects these issues, the absence of a coherent cultural policy framework that explains our shared history and guides our diplomatic posture. If Indonesia is to lead with confidence, we must move from reaction to anticipations, from instinct to strategy. Only then can culture truly function as our diplomatic compass. And the central argument that I wish to offer today is simple yet fundamental. Indonesia's cultural diplomacy must be built upon a clear and coherent cultural policy foundations. Cultural diplomacy without policy becomes symbolic, attractive, but shallow. Policy without community involvement becomes bureaucratic structures, but empty. For diplomacy to carry substance, policy must ground it and communities must animate it. We must begin to shift our representation towards substance. Instead of merely showing cultural form, we must articulate cultural meaning. Instead of displaying artifacts, we must communicate the worldviews, ethical values that shape Indonesian life. I'm glad that the minister has already mentioned some of the Indonesian material culture expression, yet he also mentioned about the values, about the cultural ideas, the very ideas of the material cultures. Only by aligning cultural policy, national identity, and diplomatic messaging can Indonesia speak with a steady, confident cultural voice at home and on the world stage. At present, Indonesia's cultural policy remains anchored in preservation and documentation. We invest enormous effort in listing tradition, preparing UNESCO nomination, and curating performances for national and international display. While valuable, this approach often reduces culture to a frozen relic rather than living ecosystem. Well, we have already heard what the minister explained about this thing. And heritage become a product, catalog, stage, and commodified. Tourism framework further reinforces encouraging tradition to be repackaged as spectacle for visitors. In this process, community frequently becomes cultural object instead of cultural agent. So the basic idea, the very basic idea is how to transform this phenomenon. What is missing is a recognition that culture is not merely collection of artifacts. Culture is lived meaning, dynamic, contextual, and deeply intertwined with community life. Until policy reflect this, Indonesia's cultural diplomacy will remain representational rather than relational. So if culture is to live, community must lead. Empowering community agency is not an optional component of cultural policy. It is a foundation. Communities must have control over their knowledge, creative expression, and adaptive strategies. Preservation without empowerment is preservation without life. So policies should foster local creative innovation, allowing communities to reinterpret heritage in ways meaningful to them. Intergenerational transmission must focus not only on skills, but on values, interpretations, and worldviews. These are the threads that sustain cultural continuity. And communities are also the most authentic actors of cultural diplomacy. Their lived experience carry a sincerity that no stage performance can replicate. When communities participate directly in international cultural exchange, diplomacy gains depth, credibility, and humanity. On the global stage, nation often requires icons that serve as quick cultural reference. Already know that in Indonesia, batik, wayang, gamelan, and some traditional cuisine are useful and help others to recognize Indonesia. But they also carry a paradox. By simplifying culture, there risk essentializing in it. Indonesia is not a single story. It is a constellation of stories. The Aceh, Torajan, Dayak, Javanese, Sasak, Minang, Papuan, and 100 more. Excellence Minister has already mentioned about hundreds of ethnic groups, almost 1,000 ethnic groups in Indonesia. And the challenge is how to represent this plurality without reducing it to a museum of fixed identities. We must move beyond museum diplomacy, where culture is displayed, not explained. Cultural diplomacy should interpret, contextualize, and narrate complexity. Only can the world see Indonesia not as a series of exotic images, but a dynamic, living cultural civilizations. Indonesia's cultural identity has two intertwined dimensions. The first, it is its deep heritage rooted in adat or custom, history, and local knowledge. This heritage grounds the nations in a sense of continuity and moral depth. The second dimension is Indonesia's vibrant modernity. Contemporary Indonesia participates actively in global cultural flows, like in film, music, design, digital art, architecture, fashion, and culinary innovations. This modernity does not negate tradition. Instead, it is extend the tradition. So the tradition and modernity, when woven together, form a coherent cultural narrative. Indonesia is not trapped in the past, nor it is detached from its root. It is a nation that adapts, innovates, and transforms. This dual image strengthens Indonesia's presence in the world stage. Other nations offer valuable lessons. Taiwan, for example, has creatively revitalized indigenous culture, using them not only as heritage, but as geopolitical identity. By empowering this community, Taiwan constructs a distinct cultural narrative in the region. South Korea, another best example to demonstrate its impact of long-term creative investment. The global rise of Hallyu, or Korean Wave, was not spontaneous. It was the result of strategic planning, consistent policies, and cross-sector collaborations. Korea embraced both tradition and modernity, never choosing one over the others. The lesson is clear. Cultural diplomacy flourishes only when development of culture is seen as a national strategic project. Indonesia must craft its own approach, not by imitation, but by deeply understanding its own cultural landscape and regional positions. And to build meaningful cultural diplomacy, Indonesia must redefine culture as a living, creative system. Culture should be viewed not only as something to be preserved, but as something continuously made and remade through social practices. And policy prioritized should include cultural education, literacy, and public engagement. Communities must be encouraged to innovate, reinterpret, and dialogue with global cultural current. Cultural workers, artists, researchers, and teachers must be positioned as cultural diplomats. Cross-sectors collaboration is essential. Cultural diplomacy is not the task of one minister, but a national ecosystem. Culture, foreign affairs, education, creative economy, digital economy, and local government must work together. And when policy is coherent, we can expect that cultural diplomacy become more strategic rather than incidental. And we must move from showcasing culture to negotiating meaning. Cultural diplomacy should not be content with performances. It should provide interpretations, context, and stories. This transforms diplomacy from spectacles into intellectual and emotional exchange. Community to community and artist to artist exchange can refine or redefine the landscapes. This interaction create genuine relationships that are more flexible and transformative than formal state program, for example. Co-creation should become a guiding principle. Instead of exporting culture as a finished product, Indonesia can collaborate to produce hybrid work, joint exhibition, and shared performances. Such partnerships embody reciprocity, not hierarchy, and this approach allows Indonesia not only to be recognized, but also to be understood, an important distinction for any nation engaging in cultural diplomacy. And to conclude, without a strong cultural policy foundation, I believe I would like to argue that cultural diplomacy risks becoming ornamental, attractive, but shallow. So policy gives shape, purpose, and ethical grounding to our diplomatic endeavors. Community empowerment gives cultures life, and Indonesia's cultural richness, born of centuries of movement, exchange, and adaptations, is our greatest diplomatic assets. The task before us is to weave heritage with innovations, identity with transformations, memory with some possibilities ahead. If Indonesia can articulate this narrative with clarity and confidence, cultural diplomacy will cease to be performance. It will become a form of peaceful engagement, a bridge of understanding, and a gift of humanity to the world. And for in the end, cultures remains our most enduring language, again, our enduring language, our most human form of diplomacy. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Professor Semiarto Aji Purwanto, for your remarkable keynote presentation. Next up in this plenary session, ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Ibu Endah Retno Astuti, SSMPhil, Director General of Diplomacy, Promotion, and Cooperation of the Ministry of Culture, Republic of Indonesia.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. Om Swastiastu, Shalom, Salam Budaya, Rahayu. Excellency, Minister of Culture, Dr. Fadlizon, ambassadors, distinguished scholars, cultural practitioners, ladies and gentlemen, Pak Wakil Rektor, Pak Khairul Huda, Pak Prof. Aji. I'm glad that the Minister and Prof. Aji have spoken before me because they have covered most of the material that I'm going to present, but please bear with me if I say most similar thing. Well, I want to start with saying some pantun because it's already an inscription in UNESCO. Pagi hari di Universitas Indonesia,
Cakep.
menenun budaya menyatukan dunia.
Artinya,
Diplomasi budaya menjalin bangsa demi pemajuan dan peradaban negara. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for having me at the first Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy, and appreciation for FISIP UI for its great cooperation jointly hosting this with the Ministry of Culture. This conference allows us to reflect on fundamental questions: how cultural policy can serve as the backbone of cultural diplomacy, ensuring coherent sustainability and ethical grounding on global stage. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past decades, cultural diplomacy has evolved from beyond ceremonial exchange or become symbolic engagement. It has become a multidimensional instrument of soft power. It now evolves as a wide ecosystem of actors, not only policymakers and diplomats, but also artists, writers, filmmakers, musicians, heritage communities, diasporic network, curators, festival organizers, researchers, and digital creators. Now, I think we all agree that a robust cultural policy provides the structural mandate and long-term resource continuity essential for cultural diplomacy. Culture cannot depend on discretionary or surplus budget. Instead, it requires stable multi-year funding to build a sustainable international partnership, enduring networks, and long-term cultural presence around the world. However, as a policymaker, we from ministries, we must acknowledge there is a persistent gap. Many cultural diplomacy initiatives remain episodic, reactive, and vulnerable a short-term budget and political cycles. Without structural policy foundations, cultural diplomacy risks being fragmented and unable to generate sustainable impact. For this reason, cultural diplomacy must have a national strategy rooted in cultural policy. We see around the world that countries that treat culture as a strategic sector, whether through national arts council, creative industry blueprints, or long-term heritage and language program, tend to project their culture more consistently and confidently abroad. Prof. Ajil already mentioned, and we can easily mention Korea, for example, as a big example of this. For Indonesia, from our efforts to safeguard batik and wayang to the expansion of Indonesian language and art promotion overseas, our task is still to update and deepen this foundation in line with contemporary realities. Ladies and gentlemen, cultural policy must also function as ethical safeguard because national diplomacy must uphold transparency, artistic autonomy, and respect for cultural rights. Cultural projection must always be grounded in community rights and cultural integrity, not merely an external image building. And cultural policy must also able to establish strong intellectual property frameworks, benefit sharing mechanism, and traditional knowledge safeguarding system. In digital spheres, cultural narratives are shaped by foreign platform and opaque algorithms. So cultural policy must reinforce digital sovereignty through national archives and strengthen digital cultural literacy. This can ensure that Indonesia's cultural diversity remains visible, conceptualized, and ethically represented in global digital spaces. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry of Culture has a mandate to protect, develop, utilize, and empower our cultural heritage according to the Law on Advancement of Culture adopted in 2017. To support this vision, Indonesia's various regulation policies, as featured in the following slides, our President, Prabowo Subianto, has also placed culture as one of the foundation of national priority or Iiccd. And Indonesia has also become a part of parties to related UNESCO conventions on convention and on conservation and on cultural advancement. The Minister of Culture has built our policies based on, Pak Menteri mentioned 3, but I add another one, so 4 pillars as featured in the slide. Education for internalizing cultural values, and second, cultural economy as a driver for creative industry. Fourth, cultural diplomacy as Indonesia's soft power, And the fourth one is the culture as a binding power amidst the vast diversity in the country. Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, scholars, listed here are slides of our flagship program from our Director General, but I have to mention one that we are proud of, that is a cultural facilitation. This is the assistance to community groups to support their cultural project through endowment fund that we call Dana Indonesiana, and also through cultural grants. Okay, now we move forward on the challenges and obstacles. In formulating and implementing cultural policies, one of the biggest challenges is that culture is not viewed as an urgent priority in economic growth and development. We can say that if any country have difficulty in budget, the sector that easily cut is culture, we must to admit that. And this led to a sporadic effort at the regional level, lack of strategy and orchestration in national level. There are some of the challenges, for example, the similarities mandates between national agencies and ministries, and issues between decentralization policies between central and regional government, again, a fragmented authority and coordination, and limited funding, budgeting, and resources for implementation, especially at the regional level, inadequate human capacity in culture, and the absence of comprehensive cultural database and archives, and still poor documentation and preservation of the intangible cultural heritage. And there is common issue on creative cultural industries versus commodification. Commercialization often overshadow the cultural values. Tension between preservation and economic exploitation is caused by underdeveloped IP protection for traditional knowledge and cultural expressions, and the gap between the local and big industries. And cultural policy must also offer protection and resilience against like new challenges, like cultural appropriation and integrity, and digital divide and disruption. And we must oversee diversity of cultural expression, representation of youth, women, and local community. And now to achieve these strategic goals, we, Indonesia, must address institutional fragmentation by establishing an interagency clearinghouse to align cultural priorities across ministries. A national cultural diplomacy strategy that is essential to set thematic priorities and guide long-term action. And then national strategy that foster network of stakeholders, and national strategy that develops innovative funding between stakeholders such as private, public partnership, matching fund, and participatory budgeting between communities in the regional level. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia's diverse cultural landscape, from Yogyakarta's revitalized traditions and Bali's enchanted performances to Eastern Indonesia's ritual network and the creative scenes of Bandung and Makassar, not only defines our nation's character, but also shows that cultural policy must be evidence-based, adaptive, and rooted in community realities. This dynamic highlights how cultural ecosystem constantly evolve with political, economic, and environmental change. Modern cultural diplomacy strategy must balance heritage with contemporary arts and creative industries, recognizing the global influence of Indonesia's writers, filmmakers, musicians, designers, and digital creators. So cultural policy is not merely administrative framework. It's also a strategic investment. I agree with Professor Aji. It determines whether our cultural diplomacy is episodic or enduring, symbolic or influential, vulnerable or resilient. In this context, the Ministry of Culture has a specific responsibility to act as a policy anchor by leading coherent cultural policy and a national cultural diplomacy strategy as a guardian of rights and ethics, as a connector and knowledge hub, and by bringing together ministries, local government, artists, communities, academics, international partners on the basis of data, research, and collaborative ministries. So, as a conclusion, I call on ministries, agencies, academic institutions, cultural communities, international partners as well to strengthen this shared agenda. By grounding cultural diplomacy in a coherent, ethical, and evidence-based cultural policy, Indonesia will secure a global cultural presence that is confident, responsible, and sustainable. I shall end my presentation with thanking everyone who showed up this morning, and thank you for presenters from around the nation and also from various countries. I wish you all have a great conference. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ibu Indah Rasuti, for sharing even more policy perspective from the Ministry of Culture. With those two distinguished keynote addresses, we conclude the plenary session 1 for Iiccd 2025. Thank you so much to our distinguished invitees. We wish you safe travels, and thank you for gracing the Iiccd 2025 with your presence. Give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, once more. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin to the next agenda, which is the second plenary session, I invite all of you, especially who are not seated yet or who are sitting in the back, to move to the front of the seats as we have plenty of empty spaces. Feel free to fill in these seats so you can engage even better with our next set of presenters. And before we enter the second plenary session, I would like to thank the Ministry of Culture of the Republic of Indonesia and the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences at Universitas Indonesia for co-hosting the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy, Iiccd 2025.
Across Indonesia's vast archipelago, from Papua's misty peaks to Sumatra's golden shores, children have always played. But here, play is never just play. Each game holds memory, wisdom, and meaning. Traditional games are not relics of the past. They are roots that ground our culture and lift our spirit. In Bentengan, we run fast, but we think faster. Protect the fort, outsmart the opponent. It's a battlefield of ideas, disguised as joyful chase. In Gobak Sodor, we guard the line. We count each other, we move as one. It's not about winning, it's about trusting your team. Congklak, with its wooded board and tiny seats, teaches us to plan, to anticipate, to give. To win, you must also know how to lose gracefully. Egram, walk tall on two bamboo stilts. It's balance and bravery, the courage to fall and rise again. Or trompa panjang, but 3 feet must move as one. Step by step together. One stumble, and we all learn. In Ular Naga, a line of children sings through twilight. The game ends, but the melody stays. It's a story told with the body. Cublak Cublak Suan is a game of trust and intuition, where the answer is not always what you see, but what you sense. Layang is a child's dream stitched by hand, made from bamboo and paper. It teaches us to look up, to imagine. Marbles, kelereng, rolling on dirt lanes, taught generations how to aim, how to focus, how to turn earth into a playground. And in Gatrik, a simple stick becomes sport, strategy, and celebration. From Dayak forest to Bali shores, from Minangkabau villages to Bugis coast, children everywhere have their own games. Yet the values are shared: respect, creativity, joy, togetherness. In a world growing louder, these games remind us to listen to each other, to tradition, to play. They don't require electricity. They don't need Wi-Fi. They need people. They need presence. And now, in a world shaped by machines and speed, we return to simple genius of tradition, to laughter of barefoot children, to the wisdom in a song, to the power of play. Let us pass them on. Let us play again. Because culture is not only what we inherit, but what we create. Indonesia, culture for future.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We will be starting the second plenary session at 10:30 sharp. So we remind all of you and we invite all of you to re-enter Auditorium Juwono Sudarsono to gather here and discuss at the second plenary session. Once again, I remind all of you that we will be starting our second plenary session shortly. So we invite all of you to come in and take a seat. Thank you. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to move on to our next agenda, the plenary session 2. This plenary session will feature the theme, Defining Cultural Diplomacy, Crossing Cultures, Weaving Worlds. Ladies and gentlemen, this plenary session will feature a discussion that unpacks how cultural diplomacy bridges societies and intertwines diverse worldviews into meaningful global engagement. The speaker for the esteemed plenary session 2 are Professor Hedi Shri Aim Saputra, Professor of Anthropology at Gadjah Mada University, Bapak Ardita Edward Yeremia PhD, Head of Undergraduate Program of International Relations, Universitas Indonesia, as well as Dr. Azhar Ibrahim, Associate Professor at Department of Malay Studies, National University of Singapore. This plenary session will be moderated by Ibu Ajeng Arani Kasih, PhD, Associate Professor of Archaeology, Universitas Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Iiccd 2025 Plenary Session 2, Defining Cultural Diplomacy, Crossing Cultures, Weaving Worlds. I invite all the speakers and moderator to come up on stage to take on plenary session 2.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ajeng Araini Kasih. I am from the Department of Archaeology, Universitas Indonesia. And this morning, in this second plenary sessions, I will be the moderator for this plenary sessions. We will, in this panel, we will examining how cultural diplomacy is defined and practiced across histories, disciplines, and geopolitical contexts. We will move beyond statelets of power and also explore culture as a living field that's shaped by identity, inequality, and global change. So we are having our speakers, Professor Hedi Sri Ahimsa Putra from Gajah Mada University, Arditya Edward Yeremia Lalisang, PhD from Universitas Indonesia, and also Dr. Azhar Ibrahim from National University of Singapore. So I'll give this first to Professor. Yeah.
Me first?
Yes?
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, good morning everybody, distinguished guests, distinguished speakers, and I'd like to thank the Dean of the Faculty of Ilmu Sosial Politik for inviting me to this prestigious conference. And this is a really great honor for me to present and share some of my ideas. I was asked to talk about cultural diplomacy from anthropological perspective, but as you know, the Dean of the Faculty, Pak Semiarto Aji, is also from anthropology. So some of anthropological views is already presented by him in his keynote speaker. And many of the points there, I quite agree with that. Now, I try to look at from different angle, and in this case, it might be more down to earth, yeah, compared to what Semiarti has talked. Yeah. It's very important to talk about cultural diplomacy and policy, yeah, but I'd like to see what actually we have had here in Indonesia. But before that, since I'm not a person from political scientist, you know, I need to have some definitions about what we mean by diplomacy and then culture, so that we can have shared understanding. And this is to avoid any misunderstanding between us in our discussion later. So diplomacy can be defined simply as the practice of conducting negotiations, managing peaceful relationships between nations, groups, or individuals. The aim is to resolve disputes and conflicts, to foster mutual understanding on certain issues, to build good relationships, and to achieve goals without conflict. So through dialogue, compromise, and persuasion, rather than coercion or military action. It involves communication, negotiation, and tech, and the result is peaceful resolution. And cultural diplomacy is the uses of cultural exchange, yeah, that is, in my view, exchange of symbols, because culture is a set of symbols or system of symbols. If we agree to base on our definition on the views of Ernst Cassirer, a philosopher, about a man, he said that human being is animal symbolicum. So symbol is the core, yeah, of our humanity. Yeah. So exchange, cultural exchange is the exchange of symbols to foster mutual understanding and strengthen international relationships. And cultural diplomacy is the strategic use of countries' cultural assets. This is important. Cultural assets. Countries' significant symbols. I think what we have talked about and we have seen in the videos, those are cultural assets of Indonesia. And we know that already. Some of them can, in the form of manuscript, language, tradition, rituals, and so forth. Yeah. And these significant symbols is used to build dialogue and cooperation with other countries and nations. And that is component of nations' soft power. Yeah. So cultural diplomacy is mostly directed toward the public in other countries. This is what you want, not to the government, but to the public. Yeah. So for the people in other countries. And the aim is to build positive foreign perceptions. So what we've seen here, we have seen in the videos, those are the attempts, yeah, of the Indonesian government actually, yeah, to build positive perceptions among foreign countries about Indonesia. Look at this video. This is Indonesia. Yeah. By seeing those videos, I think we have some new perceptions. I have to say that these videos much more better. Yeah. It's much better than videos in the few years ago. Congratulations for the Kementerian Kebudayaan. Yeah. I really happy. I'm really happy with these videos. Yeah, because now it's much more meaningful in my eyes. Yeah. And then the aim is to create a foundation of trust that can support relation between the countries. And a little bit definition, what is culture? As I mentioned before, this is a set of symbols acquired by a man through learning within his society to adapt and build his world. Yeah, so we use culture not only for adaptation, but also for building our world. Yeah. So culture are set of symbols acquired through learning, and the symbols are used to adapt and build the world. So the symbols can be learned, symbols are shared, and symbols are functional, have function. And main function of symbol is for communication. Because without symbol, I don't think we can communicate with each other. Our language, yeah, is the basic, yeah, symbolic system for us. Yeah. Without language, I don't think we can build community. Yeah. So culture is for communication, building good relationship, building collective life, and building community. Basic symbol of human society is language. That's why we'll see later, language is always mostly the main element that is introduced to other people. Yeah. So the question then is, how is the cultural diplomacy practiced? How are the international relations built through culture? Yeah. So I will not talk about the culture itself with matter dimensions and elements, but let's go to cultural asset. Yeah. This is a valuable symbol that a person, organization, country owns or controls. As we have seen in the videos, yeah, what have been shown to us, yeah, are material culture, behavioral culture, and then oral and ideational. Yeah. We have there what we call cultural assets. Yeah. Those are valuable, according to us, yeah, what we have seen in the videos, yeah, are the valuable symbols, yeah, that Indonesia has or controls. Yeah. And we as a nation have those cultural assets. And those cultural assets can be used, of course, yeah, to achieve certain goals, and that's the foundation or the basis of cultural diplomacy. Yeah. And cultural assets used in cultural diplomacy vary, of course. Yeah. It may include arts and music, yeah, and then language and education, of course, yeah, science, technology, and tourism and cuisine. Of course, you'll have more, yeah, not only this. Yeah. However, these are usually what they think as cultural assets that can be used in cultural diplomacy. And then we have that some developed countries, Western countries, actually have used consciously and actively their cultural assets in the diplomacy. They set up cultural centers in various strategic countries. Yeah. And the main aims of the cultural centers is first, introduce language and culture. We see then here, yeah, language and culture is very, very important according to many nations. Yeah. And then to build mutual trust, to strengthen socio-political relations and to expand fields of cooperation. You'll see there first Alliance Francaise. I think everyone here knows this. Yeah, it has hundreds of branches in various countries around the world, and the aim is, yeah, to spread French, yeah, bahasa Prancis. Yeah. And we have Alliance Francaise in Melbourne, Mediterranean, Singapore, and of course also in Jakarta. Yeah. And then we have another country, British Council. Yeah. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, you see here British Council, and I think everyone here knows. Yeah, British Council can be found in many parts of the world. Yeah, and through British Council, Britain introduced her culture and spread its language. This is, I can call it, kind of cultural colonization. Yeah. Yeah. When we have that, yeah, from one side, and it's very strong, it's like cultural colonization. Yeah. So if we want really to counter, yeah, this kind of colonization, we should, yeah, use also our culture, yeah, to connect with other countries. And then we have from Germany, yeah, Goethe Institute. I think everyone knows here, yeah, about Goethe Institute. In Indonesia, we have that in Jakarta and Surabaya. And of course, yeah, German language is also the main point. And then we have from Asia, Confucius Institute. This is from China. Yeah. And China has built this institute around the world. So this is also what we call cultural diplomacy, which is really, you know, based on certain policies and certain consciousness about culture and how it functions in our daily life. Yeah. And then we have actually another strategy, that is scholarship. Next. Now, I think everyone knows here about Fulbright scholarship, and how we have alumni of Fulbright scholars, and how then they make cooperation, and then they have organization. Yeah. So the alumni that become leaders or bureaucrats in their country would become good mediators, yeah, between U.S. and other countries, because Fulbright is from the U.S. Yeah. And then we have some cultural diplomacy, which is not based on government, yeah, but it's done by certain foundation. We have Rockefeller Foundation, Sumitomo Foundation, Toyota Foundation. Yeah. These are also actually part of cultural diplomacy. But I don't know whether we think of that as a part of cultural diplomacy. But that is actually part of cultural diplomacy. But it's not conducted by the government. So we see here that cultural diplomacy is not, actually can be done not only by the government, but also by foundations, yeah, philanthropies. What about Indonesia? What is Indonesia's cultural diplomacy? Now, if we look at what Indonesia has done, I think we realize then that, oh yeah, Indonesia actually has done some, yeah, or we have already cultural diplomacy, but I don't know whether we're really conscious about this. Yeah. First, giving non-aligned scholarships, Dharma Siswa. I know that some of African students, yeah, they went to Gajah Mada to study Bahasa Indonesia, and then take courses in Gajah Mada, and then also people from other countries like Azerbaijan, yeah, from Kazakhstan, yeah, from those small countries, or some from Oceania, yeah, they come, yeah, to Indonesia with this scholarship. Do I still have? Oh, only 2 minutes. Okay, sorry. Okay, let's go further. Now, we have also then slide 18, we have Rumah Budaya Indonesia. Yeah. Now, we have some Rumah Budaya in Indonesia. This is also actually part of cultural diplomacy. Yeah. in Germany, and then in Belgium. Yeah, terus next slide. Some groups, yeah, in some groups abroad, they are playing gamelan, and then next slide. Next, nah, Indomie. Yeah. I don't know whether we ever think of Indomie as part of our cultural diplomacy. Yeah. But Indomie is quite popular in Nigeria, yeah, and also in Arab Saudi. So if we can use this as part of our cultural diplomacy, I think it will be very strategic. Next slide, please. Again, one before that, we don't have. Now, this is what I mean. Tempe, yeah. Tempe is very popular in some countries, yeah, even in England. Yeah. So food is also, yeah, part of our culture, and can be part of our cultural diplomacy. Okay, the last slide, please. From those slides, I think we can see that before that slide, that there are steps that can be taken to spread or to introduce our culture to other countries. Yeah, like literature. Okay, I'm sorry, too long for you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ahimsa. That's very interesting about the cultural diplomacy. We are talking about speaker, Yeremia Lalisang, PhD. Please,
Thank you so much, Mbak Ajeng. A very good morning, everyone. I hope my slide is already there. Yeah, my name is Yeremia Lalisang. I'm the head of undergraduate international relations program here at the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia. So today I want to tell you two stories, actually. Stories about dancers who crossed borders in the 1950s and 60s. These aren't just history. They show us what cultural diplomacy could be, but rarely is anymore. But I need to tell you something first. I didn't discover these stories. Brilliant scholars did it. Emily Wilcox, for example, spent years in archive uncovering China's dance diplomacy. Jennifer Lindsay from Australia documented Indonesia's cultural missions across 50 countries. And Indian scholars also gave us the theoretical tools to understand what these stories mean. And I have to say that I'm deeply indebted to all of them. What I'm doing today is simpler. I try to bring the research together, telling these stories and ask, can we learn something? Can we do this kind of work again? So let's start in Beijing in 1954. Chang Chun was 20 years old, a dancer from Shanghai. To learn their dances, to learn Indonesian dances, to learn Indian dances and Burmese dances. She then told her teachers, why can't I just study ballet? I do not want to do it. 2 years later, Indonesian government sent Balinese dance teachers to Beijing. Chang Chun was selected to study with them. You know what she did? She had refused to get on the bus to class. Her exact words, this dance is base and strange, she said. Think about that prejudice for a moment. This wasn't politics. This was visceral in her bones. European ballet equaled high art. Asian dance equaled something lesser. That's what colonialism does. It teaches you to despise what's yours, what's your neighbor's. So what changed her? Not a lecture, not ideology. Her body changed her mind. In 1957, she studied with Uday Shankar, the legendary Indian dancer. Every day, rigorous training. Uday Shankar even choreographed a solo just for Changchun. 1957 to 1959, year-long intensive course, 4 Balinese maestro teach Balinese dance in Beijing Dance Academy. In 1960s, she again learned Burmese classical dance with master teacher Tao Kin Nyut. The instructions was simple for Changchun: study hard and resemble the original. Repetition, day after day, the labor of learning. Her prejudice did not disappear because someone convinced her all cultures are equal. It dissolved because her body learned it first. Fast forward to January 1961 in Rangoon, today's Yangon. China and Burma, critical moment. Chou Enlai leads a diplomatic delegation. There's a performance. Changchun dances a classical Burmese duet. The dance ends. Burmese Premier Unu stands up. Yes, he stood up from his chair, leads the entire room in thunderous applause. Then he does something nobody expected. He asked Changchun and his partner to perform it again. Right then, a few days later, not because China was powerful, not because of the economic leverage, it worked because everyone in that room knew. They knew Changchun had spent years learning the Burmese dance. Her performance was visible proof of respect. Even a journalist at that time wrote, the whole room 4 weeks, for 2 years. Their job? Train Chinese dancers in Balinese and cultural missions to over 50 countries. Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, some Western nations too. These were not quick visits, extended tours, weeks, sometimes months. But here's the thing, they weren't just performing, they were learning. Give workshop for the local artists? Yes. But also study local music, study local dance, bring back new knowledge, new instruments, new idea. When Indonesian artists came to China, they didn't just teach. They studied how China was building revolutionary culture, how China trained dancers. But it has to be more than national interest. It has to be the mix between learning and showcasing. So, can we do this kinds of work again? Changchun's later life. In 1980s, Changchun's returned to India for intensive study and wrote a book about Indian dance. That's the book. She authored the book written in Chinese. And younger generations of Chinese learn Indian dances from Changchun's pioneering work. Meaning that there is a message, there is always a transfer into the younger generations of Chinese. And the connections between India and China then becomes real. And Indonesia's legacy in cultural missions in 1950s and 60s shaped also Indonesia's international recognitions. Artists return home transformed, strengthen their cultural confidence. Why do these stories matter? They are not just historical curiosities, they prove something. Cultural decolonization is possible. Through practice, mutual understanding can be embodied, not just proclaimed. Genuine transformations creates effects that strategy cannot manufacture. States can support this if they are willing to share authority with the artists. Our world today, soft power competition, tourism-driven cultural program, material interest dominating everything. But I think we can recover. Faith in mutual learning, willingness to be transformed, and commitment to genuine exchange. Can we do that kind of work again? I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yere. It's very thought-provoking. Like, can we do that again? Okay. But can we continue with our third speaker first, then we can have discussions.
All right, thank you, Madam Moderator. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here in this inaugural convention on cultural diplomacy at UI. Yeah, it's wonderful that I never thought that there's such a conference, yeah, on cultural diplomacy. In fact, at our department, we're just about to embark a module on cultural diplomacy. So when I was invited, this was like, wow, this is wahyu, revelation, that is, yeah. I want to start with 2 or 3 anecdotes here. The first, when I grew up in the interaction and intersections of cultures. I grew up singing Tanah Airku oleh Ibu Sud, yeah, you know, the famous song. So when I landed at the airport, the song, of course, vibrated again the entire airport. And I was just like, wow, this is my childhood days, yeah. In that song, there's no word of Indonesia. It's just Tanah Airku, which is also the language in Bahasa Melayu or Bahasa Indonesia. It's still our motherland, our country, yeah. So it was something which is we've been singing, all the Malay boys, the Malay girls, been singing in school, until that we realized that, oh, it's not ours. It is Indonesians, yeah. So to realize that, I was like, wow, all along I thought it was us, right? And it was when I grew up and, you know, university days, then I realized that, wow, there's history behind this fabulous song. And it is very moving a song, yeah? Second is about batik, right? Every time when I wear batik, people come to me, wow, that's Indonesian, yeah? So all along we have been wearing batik too. But thanks to post-war, batik was popularized by Indonesia, like it or not. It was popularized by Indonesia, and people in the region wear batik. Today, national event in Singapore and in Malaysia, people wear batik, and it is associated with Nusantara, yeah, the bigger archipelago, including the Malay Peninsula. But what is interesting is actually the Indonesian cultural production, yeah, not exported but shared. Exported means you are calculative. Shared means you have that kind of altruistic, benign way of sharing things. And I think that is wonderful. Professor Aditya mentioned just now about President Sukarno's attempt at cultural diplomacy via dance. Yeah? Actually, from within Indonesia, President Sukarno initiated the codification of Malay dance, Tarian Serampang 12. That has become a standard for Malay songs, for Malay dance. We don't even know that Indonesia codified it, because we have been dancing in school in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Brunei, thinking that all along it was us too, right? It was codified in Sumatra and later on spread throughout. All along we have been dancing it, but we don't know how to codify it. But thanks to Indonesia, Indonesia shared the codification, yeah? Alhamdulillah. All right, let me share, yeah, the point that I want to talk about. I don't think I want to say much because I think all our distinguished speakers have covered, yeah, especially a keynote by Prof. I think almost I was thinking, why should I be sitting here? Because everything has been covered, yeah? And this is very, I can imagine my other speakers after me, yeah? So just like when I want to say about cultural obligare or cultural obligation, I think before we talk about diplomacy, we need to talk about the obligation, yeah? Why we need cultural diplomacy, how do we plan, yeah? I think we have sort of a lot of lists, yeah, in our excitement, yeah? But there are also challenges in what we call the cultural distortion, the cultural disruption, and the cultural demonization, which is all the opposite of cultural diplomacy. Yeah? What constitutes cultural diplomacy, I think most of the speakers have covered. But let me go through again a bit of just highlighting few points here. Yeah? That culture can be just something that makes us feel good and cultured, yeah? Which is quite natural for all human beings. Cultural understanding allows us to comprehend the realities of the present and including the past, that cultural forces bind individuals to the practices and the values of their forefathers and even their neighbors. We live in the world where identity consciousness is both celebrated and contested, but today I find that more contested than celebrated. The global order is multiracial, multicultural, multilinguistic, and multi-religious identities, although hegemony of one cultural paradigm persists, that should make us become cultural timid, because of one hegemony, right? So this is something along the way where nation building comes concern of excitement of creating national culture, and this is where we start to create borders. And culture has no borders. Political entity has borders, but culture has no borders. And this is where cultural diplomacy is very much needed. Yeah? So the basic foundation of cultural obligation are cultural, it is a commitment, ordering and civilizing lives. We as steward of culture bearing the responsibility to ensure that cultural traditions, heritage, including environment, for the benefit of future generation, which is of course within your neighbors and outside. Cultural obligation conditions the way we think and organize ourselves and how we interact, engage and develop. And finally, I think noblis oblique, which is another term where I think this philosopher, Spanish philosopher of Ortega Gasset used this term, noblis oblique, the obligation of the nobles, and part of it which is to deliver that cultural obligation. This is actually being taken up by, as early by Shahre, Sultan Shahre, in his writings. So I would not want to go into the affirmation of cultural diplomacy. This is where I think had been covered more or less. But I would like to share something about the what I call it, the opposite of cultural diplomacy, where there was this war because of inability to understand one's culture. And this actually narrated in a famous text called Sulalatus Salatin, or the Sejarah Melayu, written roughly around 16th, 17th century, written in Aceh, but was actually recorded by the descendants of the Malaccan Sultanate, who was actually in captivity in Aceh. So he wrote this text and he related the story of Singapura. Singapura was once the port city, which is then part of the Sriwijaya polity. And these Javanese Majapahit, this is, of course, this history is narrated in terms of literature, but I would just want to read a bit so that we can know the very need of cultural diplomacy. So the Javanese delegation sent a emissary to Singapura, which is my country, and this is where it was read. The letter was read by Paduka Sri Pikrama Wira. It said, this is a letter from the Javanese Majapahit ruler. May it please the Paduka Sri Pikrama Wira, my younger brother, to take pleasure in the work of Javanese carver. The Singapura possessed such a craftsman. So it was a gift. The gift was an unwrapped by Paduka Sri Pikamawira. He saw a wood shaving roll like an earplug. The Malay call it subang. His Majesty smiled, understanding its implication and demands of the Batara of Majapahit. His Majesty said, he mocks our manliness, so he sent us an earplug. Not your iPhone earplug, This is subang, So the envoy bowed and spoke, my lord, this is not the message of your brother, the Batara of Majapahit. His Majesty meant is there any craftsman in your Majesty's kingdom who can shave the wood as fine as this? the ruler of Singapore seen this as an insult to him, not knowing that the Javanese delegation had a different intent. War broke out. There was a war between the Majapahit and Singapura. The first war was repelled, but the second war, the Javanese occupied Singapura, and that leads to an establishment of the Malaccan Sultanate. Can you imagine? Just because of not able to understand a cultural grief, it leads to war, and fortunately gave rise to another sultanate called Malacca. All right, that was history. Yeah, so we need to learn something. I'm sure there's a lot of text that tells about diplomatic relations. Yeah, in Nusantara. What then contribution of cultural diplomacy? What can it do to us? I think as a teacher of culture and history and literature, I think cultural diplomacy will enable us to appreciate other cultures, infuse self-knowledge about one's own culture. Yeah? Know thy culture means you are able then to understand others too. Cultural diplomacy puts the equation of culture on our practice in policy and planning. And to be serious in our cultural production provide us pride and a sense of mission, yeah, to share of our cultural excellences. Let's look at some of the things that we have been seeing today. For example, if you go to the National Gallery of Singapore, there was this big painting by Raden Saleh, yeah? Acquired by it's originally from Java, of course, but it was acquired by the Singapore Gallery. Part of it is not to tell the world that Singapore bought it, but to tell the world that we appreciate Indonesian art. Because there are some Indonesian friends who were not happy why Singapore got it, right? The idea is to showcase that if you live in Singapore, you're part of Singapore, you're also part of the region. The region art is also should be appreciated by fellow Singaporeans. That was actually the intention. Today there is a big celebration, yeah, about batik. If you can see batik in Thailand, for example, the collection of Kings Chulalongkorn is one good example, right? So we have the state of affair. We talk about serumpun, yeah, but mostly it's still rhetorics. I think academics needs to do more on this part. UNESCO cultural heritage, somehow which is good, but eventually we becoming competitor with each other, rather than we celebrate the regional excellence. Yeah? What can be done to enhance cultural diplomacy? I think this is something where the role of academia, role of corporate sector, we have all those planning, cultural exchanges and so on. I think it is good, but we need to do more. We need to do it more meaningfully. Yeah? Then we have what are the things which is not accomplished. Yeah? Among others, I guess, we don't make our artists, our literati as diplomatic ambassadors. Yeah? In fact, our cultural attaché are very shy people, yeah, in respective country. In fact, our diaspora workers are more visible in neighboring country than our diplomatic cultural attaché, because I don't see them around. Yeah, yeah. All right, then there's something that could be done then. But the big thing, I think, Dirjen said, yeah, somehow we need to plan and we have limited resources. We have big plan, but with small budget. Every time, even at the campus level, to do cultural diplomacy program, we have small budget. I tell you, it's in hundreds, yeah, not in thousands. Yeah. All right, and what are some of then we need to start to think about the cultural disinformation, the cultural demonization, right? We need to correct it. Out there are so many things talking about bad things about each other. Like, for example, the word Indo. It's not very nice. I tell my Malaysian friend and my Singaporean friend. And then my Indonesian friend, Malaysia. That's not nice. Don't do that. And then me, Singaporean, every time I go around Singapore Center of Zionism, Come on, guys, you know, be a part of this world. And then new immigrants come in. They say, oh, these are sing cakes, you know. That's not very nice, yeah? So cultural diplomacy must also involve cultural education here, yeah? We need to plan for cultural icons. We need to share around our cultural icons, yeah? And these are some of the critical works, yeah? I guess Indonesian intelligentsia have reflected many of the limitations of culture. I'm not able to read here. I wish we could have what do you call it, symposium, a common reading. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's gather 20 of us, 30 of us. Let's do reading and compile all readings from the region to talk about this cultural diplomacy and so on. I will appreciate, yeah, the writings of our friend here. Radha Panchadana, which I think is a good way. Oh, from this faculty, wonderful. Oh, wow, I didn't even know that. I see, all right. Kirim salam. Oh, Paswe Al-Fatiha. Okay, all right, on that note, time's up, but I would like to learn more from this conference. And actually, I'm a teacher of literature. I don't know much of cultural diplomacy, but at least I shared a story earlier. Let's not repeat the mistake, yeah? And let's live together and celebrate our cultural excellence. On that note, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We learned so much from these plenary sessions. Before I open discussions and questions from the audience, I would like to promote a discussions here from the three of you. We already talked about cultural diplomacy and decolonizing the cultural diplomacy and the serumpun ideas. So, what's next? What can we do next from these discussions that we are no longer like the Bandung spirits, but more about material benefits? And is Rumah Budaya enough, or what do you think about that? And how can we promote our serumpunness things?
Maybe I start first. Yeah, I guess, yes. I guess one practical things that we can do is to beef up our modules, yeah, modules mata kuliah, yeah, di sini we call it, on cultural diplomacy. This is something that we heard before, but we have not really sit down and planned it, yeah. We have, let's say we have residency, yeah. We have literature residency, but do we have cultural diplomacy residency? That would be very interesting, right? We have, right? Okay, wonderful. So what else we can do? I think among others, things that as simple as exhibition, yeah, to get the young ones to, because they are the one who going to be the cultural ambassadors, yeah. Cultural diplomacy is not just the work of embassies, right? It's not just the work of cultural icons. It's the work of our young ones, yeah. So we need to have engagement, yeah, or we do what we call it summer courses, yeah. But summer courses in Southeast Asia, we have summer every day lah. So we should not have summer courses, you know, because it's so Americanized in that sense, yeah. We should have a special courses during school holiday, yeah, to cultivate young ones, yeah, to be familiar with this topic. Unless our faculty already embark on this, yeah. I'm not sure. I think, Prof, you can may share what UI's curriculum like.
Okay, thank you very much. Continuing with the ideas of my friend, I think the cultural diplomacy should become the commitment of every citizen and the country on abroad, because actually they are the spearheads of culture. Because everywhere we go, actually we are cultural ambassador. So we always bear our culture. When they look at us, then how we behave, how we talk, yeah, this is part of our culture. So we need to be conscious about that. we are all cultural ambassadors, and people need to be aware about that. And when they go abroad, then they know they are cultural ambassadors, and they can learn from the others, and also the others can learn from them. And that's actually what the core of the cultural diplomacy is. So by um, learning, yeah, others' culture and showing our culture to others, I think we can build cultural diplomacy better in this case. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think cultural diplomacy in the future should also be directed towards more two-way exchanges rather than only like an avenue to showcase our culture. From an Indonesian perspective, I can tell you that Indonesians academia they do not really like to study about other countries, other cultures. Indonesians pursuing higher degree abroad, they always study about Indonesia, end up studying about Indonesia, but not really, about different cultures and different societies. I noticed this when I teach the class named IR in Southeast Asia. I asked my students at the class, do you know about Singapore's foreign policy? Do you know about Philippines' foreign policy? What kind of dynamics, domestic dynamics shapes these respective countries' foreign policy? So, no, students doesn't really study about neighbors, about neighboring countries, but I think I'm intrigued by the proposal of, Professor Aza, about, it should be like a sense of regional identity as well, rather than, promoting Indonesia's own cultural icon or Indonesia's own cultural product or whatever. From one perspective, it will be perceived as somehow, why then we put our budget to promote other cultures as well? But that's the point of two-way exchanges. That's the point of intercultural communications, intercultural interactions, to really find the similarities between all of us, which is all of us are humans after all. So cultural diplomacy should be directed towards this more like humanitarian perspective as well, in my understanding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answers. So we still have sometimes an open questions from the public. First and second. And third, yeah. The first one, yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Abimanyu. I'm a graduate student of Southeast Asian Studies here in University of Indonesia in Faculty of Humanities, right across the street. So if you guys would like to pay a visit, I would like to be a guide for you guys as well. And cultural diplomacy is actually one of the courses within my major, so it's very relatable, especially about this conference. And as I stated in the previous plenary and also in this plenary, the indigenous community must be allowed to own their narrative and also through their indigenous knowledge, which also by Professor Ahimsa, I think indigenous knowledge could be seen as cultural assets for them. And however, we constantly see contemporary critics regarding certain tradition that's seen probably as primitive or pretty ancient and not related to contemporary discussions. For example, like Tanim Rambang tradition in Sumba, which is like forced marriage in Sumba, or even in Tabut tradition in Bengkulu that face many critics from Sunni Muslim clergy and scholars, and many rejection of mystification of customary tradition within Indonesian communities. So my questions to all speakers, Mr. Aditya, Pro Ahimsa, and also Mr. Azhar Ibrahim, how could cultural diplomacy communicate this tradition, especially to wider international community that consider themselves as probably more modern or empirical communities, and also how to weave and negotiate it to contemporary issues and engage it with certain initiatives such as Rumah Budaya Indonesia or any kind of initiatives without creating or reduce the meaning of the customary traditions, the customary tradition of that example. So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Do you want to answer or collect the questions?
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. Yes, this is the problem with us. Usually, if we look at the videos of the Kementerian Kebudayaan, although it's good, yeah, I have some notes. It's more about our tradition. Yeah, it's not quite modern. So we ask ourselves, where is the modernity of Indonesia? Something like that. Yeah. So this is the problem of us. Yeah. Actually, the culture that we need to, let's say, others know about us is not only the tradition that we have, but also the present situation, the current situation. And that's what miss in, I think, some of the videos already. We are, perhaps it's quite related to our identity. So if we lost this, we think we'll lose our identity. But actually, if we talk about culture, it should be about the contemporary culture as well. And that's why actually we need more videos about Indonesian movies, Indonesian modern literature, yeah, and other modern symbols in Indonesia. That's also what we need to introduce to other countries, to other nations, to other people. Yeah? But sometimes we don't think about it. That's why I ask ourselves about Indomie, about tempe, because maybe we never think that's part of our culture. It's more about art, but actually food, yeah, culinary things are also part of our culture. Yeah. Rendang, of course, we know that. Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't think culture as wide as that, yeah, so that it can cover a lot of things. Sometimes more about tradition, which we get from our ancestors. Yeah. Well, that's okay, yeah, but we need, yeah, to give more impression about present situation in our country, in our culture, so that people can really, oh yeah, yeah, they have Indonesian movies, yeah, they have Indonesian literature, yeah, something like that. And in that case, if we want to introduce that and to share our heritage to our modern culture, I think like literature, we need to translate them. Yeah. We need to translate them into other languages so that people know, oh, there are literature like this. Yeah. Otherwise, what we know then, or what other people know, is more about our tradition, it's about the past, and not our present situation. And I think that that's one of the challenges in our cultural diplomacy. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I think your questions is very brave, I think, but you know, it's $1,000,000 questions actually. It's very difficult to answer. And in my understanding, it's always good to always make sure that we always have space to discuss everything. You know, you can define something as, you know, as a tradition that is good, this particular tradition is bad, so this particular tradition should not be promoted as our part of culture diplomacy. But at least the discussion should be continued rather than, you know, make a one conclusive framework that should be included in our cultural diplomacy or not. So what I'm trying to say is we need to ensure that we are ready to share the authority in doing this cultural diplomacy. Meaning that we need to position ourselves as open as possible to really ensure that the two-way communications is happening, including from the indigenous community. So the communications in promoting cultural diplomacy, in my understanding, should not always be like a top-down, but also bottom-up. Meaning, ensuring that the space for the from below to be also heard in whatever Indonesia or other countries trying to do in cultural diplomacy, I guess. Thank you.
Maybe I just sum up. I guess the moment we want to do something for, let's say, a indigenous community, the tendency is to do for them rather than to do with them, right? I think that's a totally different position. Secondly, there is a lens that when we want to look and promote them, there is a tendency that we are actually superior and then we want to help them. Yeah? In that process, we sort of like exoticize. Yeah? I agree with Prof. For example, we feature, let's say, in Semenanjung, we have orang asli. So the moment we talk about this is an indigenous community, orang asal, orang asli. The moment we want to feature them, we always want to see them in their traditional dance, traditional crafts, but not them adjusting, adapting to modernization. We don't do that. In fact, we think that, oh, if we project them, struggling with this modernization, is no longer authentic. I think it needs to be corrected. We cannot become new Orientalists, right? They exoticize our own people. I think that is very dangerous. And that's where I think an understanding of culture in the sense of the present day needs must also be computed.
Thank you for the hard questions and also the answers. Can we move to another? Yes. This lady with the purple mask. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Ayu. I have one question for Dr. Yeremia. It's nice example to bring the cultural diplomacy between India and China, but seeing the current political conditions, I think that the previous example was not really relevant anymore because both China and India now are competing each other, let's say in security or in weapons technology and something like that. So what do you think? My question is, how can the cultural diplomacy bring back those countries and other countries to be friend anymore, something like that? That's the question. Is it possible? And then maybe how, any idea? Because yeah, when I see the current political condition between India and China, they are not good. Thank you.
Can I just directly answer it? I think we need to shift our attention when we are discussing about diplomacy. Diplomacy is not only interstate relations, but non-state, especially people, are now heavily involved in two-way interactions between nations. So, yeah, maybe from one dimensions that it no longer works, but, you know, Indian dances in China, you know, many Chinese are still the fan of this Indian dance, brought in China in 1950s. And it's like a cultural icon. And the dances are still being learned. So maybe there are conflicts between governments, but connections between people can sustain. And these connections, these people-to-people connections, these connections between culture, should not be perceived as a secondary to international relations, because it is the central part of international relations. So we need to rethink the way we understand international relations. Indian government and Chinese government might be involved in conflicts, but Indian and Chinese are still connected thanks to the efforts from 1950s and 1960s. So my suggestion is to expand the way we understand international relations. And I don't think we cannot say that that example is irrelevant simply because there is a conflict right now. And what can make us very sure that if we replicate the way the Indian and the Chinese interact in the 1950s, we can be very sure that, for example, it's no longer relevant in contemporary context. I don't think so. So I just want to provide an example of how we can do cultural diplomacy in a different way, in different perspective. Thank you.
Okay. It's okay. 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 The third.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Salihah from the Ministry of Culture. I work at the Directorate for Cultural Diplomacy, Promotion, and Cultural Cooperations. So a big round of applause to our distinguished speakers today who deliver their quite thought-provoking presentations. I have a questions on what Dr. Yeremia said earlier, mentioned earlier about that cultural diplomacy could be a tool for tourism marketing. It's quite interesting for me, for especially that you said when culture becomes a marketing tool, no genuine interest in learning from other countries, success measures in revenue, not relationship, and no space for transformation. So I have two questions, Dr. Yeremia, regarding to these topics. The first question is, I believe that many of us here agree that tangible culture is a far way more easily measured than the intangible ones. So my question is, the first question, how do we measure intangible outcomes? If you said success is not measured in revenue, then what meaningful and standardized indicators can measure relationship building, trust, and mutual understanding? And my second question is, to synthesis from of these all topics, how can cultural diplomacy leverage tourism without reducing culture to a community, ensuring reciprocal learning, shared benefits, and respectful cultural integrity? Thank you, Dr. Yeremia.
I also want to invite other speakers to also throw your ideas into her questions. It is not only about my presentations, but I'm sure my two colleagues here also have an interesting point of view on that. So my perspective is there is nothing wrong with tourism promotions, but cultural diplomacy should not only about tourism promotions. That's what I'm trying to say. It has to go beyond tourism promotions, yeah? And I think cultural diplomacy, two-way interactions between nations can, at the end, contribute to whatever material interests that these countries have in conducting that interactions. But whether it is intended or unintended, but in my understanding, if we have two-way communications, two-way interactions, then eventually it will contribute as well to whatever material interest we have. And there is also nothing wrong with delivering our national interests. That's the thing. And what I'm trying to provoke here is to rethink the way we measure success in cultural diplomacy. That's the thing. I know that sometimes we measure success because bureaucrats spend state's budget and they need to be held accountable in how they spend the state budget in doing whatever cultural diplomacy program. Yeah, I understand that very much, but I think this conference is also an avenue for us to discuss that some material indicators should also be complement with something that is intangible. Human connections is really hard to measure. Friendship is really hard to measure. And we cannot measure success in, for example, the number of visitors in our Indonesian pavilion in Osaka, the World Expo, for example. Yeah, we need to spend extra effort as well part of them is to educate our audience that we target something bigger, which is real connections, real mutual understanding, rather than short-term material benefit. So I hope this conference can provide us with some recommendations on how, and how this kind of community here in Indonesia always talking about, promoting culture, not only for material benefits, but also for real friendship and mutual understanding between nations. I think maybe Prof. Asa.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think we need also to understand actually what have been done by the government, in Indonesian government, about cultural diplomacy. That's why I think we need to know about how is about Rumah Budaya Indonesia, what did they do, what are they doing right now, and how many Rumah Budaya we have if we really want to use that as part of our cultural diplomacy, not only as promoting Indonesian culture, but also two-way communication where the local people, I mean people in other countries, can learn something about Indonesia and Rumah Budaya and how, and then our people can also introduce our budaya to other people. Yeah? I think what we need more is how to design strategies to do the cultural diplomacy appropriately. I'm afraid we are not, we don't have it yet, this kind of strategy, but this is not my part to answer. It's more on the part of the Kementerian Kebudayaan. And as we know, Kementerian Kebudayaan, as a Kementerian Kebudayaan, is just started with this Prabowo presidency. Yeah. In the past, kebudayaan is always related to pariwisata or to pendidikan. It's never in itself. And that's also the problem. Because when kebudayaan is only part of the other thing or related to other thing, then you don't really pay attention to kebudayaan. And I think now is the time, because we all now have Kementerian Kebudayaan, now is the time to really think seriously about cultural diplomacy and then cultural policy, and that's already mentioned by our Dean, Mas Semiarto Aji, and then design strategies related to do cultural diplomacy, and with the inputs from our conference today. I think that's what we need to do. Thank you.
From my experience, I did engage with some tourist operator. What I realized they are so eager to tell about Singapore. But it's like, it's like a trauma after listening to them. Presenting what things about Singapore to other tourists. Yeah? So things like, even like jokes that we have in the coffee shops, they include that as part of things about Singapore, which I think to say the cultural illiteracy is real. So, we need to spend a bit of time, because they, apart from our airport, cultural tourist agent, tourist guide are also our important ambassadors. So if we don't really put some attention on those, they can tell, that is on the practical ones. Yeah? The other one which I thought we could spend a bit time, we have not maximized cultural exchanges at the undergraduate level. I think it is a bit expensive today. Yeah, I think campuses are now a little bit open as compared to the past, I noted, but the cost is rising. But campuses cannot pay for all these cultural exchanges. Yeah, we need support. We need not just government support, corporate support. That's one. I've noticed that those students of mine that went to Malang for 7 days, when they came back, they were like, wow, we are now Nusantara. It's really, the transformative effect to students. It may be impressionistic, but it is a gateway for them to know their neighbors. Yeah? I think those are the areas. The other one, maybe apart from cultural exchanges for the students, at a slightly higher level, I think we also have not really optimized, the intellectuals that have studied on another nation. For example, the earlier question on China-India relations. Yeah? That is all the more important today. Yeah, that let's say we read the works of Romila Thapa, a famous Indian historian, right? That covered much of China's history. Yeah. So all the more, I think we should pay attention to Romila Thapa. Yeah. Apart from Pankaj Mishraj and so on, and I'm sure there are also Chinese who study about Indians too. And I think these are the areas which I think we can complement. For example, I don't think we, from the Malay-speaking area of Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, and Southern Thailand, we can know Indonesia without the prominence of Indonesian intellectuals in our cultural debate. You can imagine their absence, the absence of Indonesian intellectuals in our repertoire, we wouldn't be able to understand Indonesia better, right? We cannot just afford to go Batam then to understand Indonesia, right? We need beyond Batam, right? Thanks.
This is a very interesting discussions, but we are very sorry that we meet the time limits already. We need to supposed to end this discussion. So what can we learn from this panel is like a cultural diplomacy is to foster understanding, to foster mutual understanding. It should go beyond marketing, tourism promotions and marketing. So it's not only the works of the government, and as Professor Ahimsa said, like us, each of us is also a cultural ambassadors of our own. So, so I think it's also the works of schools and universities that have to invest more on art and culture, so we can learn two ways about each other with other people in this politics situations. It needs to have a mutual understanding of others. It's really important. So this is a very important thing to do, I think, in the future. So one more time, thank you for our three distinguished speakers here. Can we give one more applause for them?
Thank you so much to Ibu Ajeng Araini Kasih, PhD, for leading our discussion today. And of course, for the panelists, we invite all the speakers and Ibu Ajeng to take a picture together on the center of the stage. Photo in 3, 2, 1. All right. Once again, thank you so much, Ibu Ajeng, for leading the discussion, and to our speakers for very fruitful insights for all of us. And of course, all of our participants for the active discussion, and I hope that has successfully ignited your minds for the upcoming discussions as well. Ladies and gentlemen, with the conclusion of the plenary session 2 just now, we may now proceed to our next agenda, which is very special. It is called the Special Ambassadorial Talks. In this session, we will be discussing all things diplomacy with our diplomat guests and speakers. We have His Excellency Bagas Hamsoro, who is a distinguished Indonesian diplomat who previously served as ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Kingdom of Sweden and the Republic of Latvia, and he previously served as ambassador to Lebanon, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, and senior advisor to the ministry. We also will be joined by His Excellency Mark Gerhardsen, who is a distinguished senior diplomat of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, currently serving as ambassador to Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and ASEAN since 2024. This special ambassadorial talks will feature discussions with these excellencies to share more about their experiences as ambassadors. And to help us guide and moderate the discussion, we will be having Ibu Dwi Ardana Riswari Sundrijo, PhD, as our moderator. She is an associate professor in international relations at Universitas Indonesia, where she specializes in transnational society. Ibu Dwi Ardana Riswani Sundrijo, PhD, is also an author with contributions to the Palgrave Macmillan titled Regionalizing Global Human Rights Norms in Southeast Asia. I think without any further ado, I would love to invite His Excellency Bagas Hapsoro, His Excellency Mark Judson, and Ibu Dwi Ardana Riswari Sundrijo as speakers and moderator to the stage for the special ambassadorial talks.
Okay, here we are now in a very strategic and important session held in a very crucial hour, 12 o'clock up to 1 o'clock, which actually we should have lunch. So trust us, trust me, that this session will be very important and very interesting. We will have it casually as we're going to have it as a talk show. Yeah. Everyone can share your interest by asking question or telling you any comment at any time, but I will be the moderator of the session, so I will decide which question we will address. Yeah. The MC has introduced 3 of us. I don't need to have further introduction. And shall we start talking to each other?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, His Excellency Bagas Hapsoro, His Excellency Mark Gerisanik, Pak Bagas and Pak Mark, if I may. Yeah. Cultural diplomacy. Yeah. In theory, cultural diplomacy is the exchange of ideas, information, art, and other aspects of culture among nations and their people to foster mutual understanding. In theory, in your experience, what is cultural diplomacy from your daily experience? Pak Bagas?
Thank you very much, Mbak Riris, and welcome, my ambassador. It's really good to see you, and I'm honored to be here, my alma mater, University of Indonesia. I saw some colleagues here also, Pak Anin, my good friend, and Bu Susana as well. But this is very, very common for us, cultural diplomacy. This morning we heard some interesting review from our minister and also our colleagues from the Director General of Culture. What is the definition of cultural diplomacy? In practice, in my experience as an ambassador, both in Lebanon together with Pak Anin and also in Sweden, we know exactly, at least on the relation between two countries, at least on economic sense, countries are about interest, on political relations, about the interest. So when economic relations between countries are transactional, so culture, socio-culture, I think it will be becomes a bridge, bridge because it's built on a mutual understanding. I followed some discussion just now on the ASEAN issue with Pak Abraham and also Pak Aditya. Very interesting issue. In ASEAN, we do have 3 pillars. The first pillar is about the political and security community. And second is about the economic community. But third is not less important, socio-cultural. And I think the founding fathers, the founder of ASEAN, I was thinking this one, the 3 combination must also persist. Something that we can learn also from Bung Karno, Bung Hatta, right after independence, that these three issues must also be there for our regional cooperation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, okay, according to Pak Bagas, cultural diplomacy is part of the third pillar in ASEAN relations. But as it is a third pillar, doesn't mean that it is less significant compared to the first and the second. So it's not only, we cannot any longer say that cultural diplomacy is part of low-key diplomacy because it plays like a very strategic role in relations between states. Yeah. And what is your experience, what is for you cultural diplomacy in your experience, particularly in terms of expatriation of the cultural heritage? Pak Mark.
Thank you very much. First of all, Selamat Siang. It's a great honor to be here and to talk to you or with you. I'm looking forward to the discussion, so please feel free to ask any questions at any time. I really hope we can have an interactive discussion. As the ambassador of the Netherlands to Indonesia, for us, cultural diplomacy is at the heart of what we do. Why is that? Also, for us, we work with three pillars, similar to what the ambassador said. There's a political pillar, a economic pillar, and there's a third pillar. Actually, I think we use pillars like ASEAN does and others do. It's not exactly the right metaphor. Because, yes, you have politics and you have economics. And politics is usually the G to G, government to government diplomacy, the old-fashioned diplomacy that you use to prevent war, that you use to enhance friendship between nations on the government level. And you have private sector cooperation, and that is economic diplomacy. As embassy, we try to help Dutch companies do business in Indonesia and vice versa, Indonesian companies to do business in the Netherlands. But there's this third topic. I would define it broader than cultural diplomacy. I would define it as people-to-people contacts. And especially between Indonesia and the Netherlands, people-to-people contacts are at the heart of what we do. Whether it's scholarships and educational cooperation, whether it's about language. I was here already earlier today at UI to give a lecture on Dutch, to the community of Dutch studies, which has been going on already for 55 years. But of course, language cooperation goes back much longer. And there's much more when it comes to people contacts. There are 2 million people in the Netherlands that have an Indonesian connection. And there are here in Indonesia maybe 25,000 or more alumni who have studied in the Netherlands. So on that basis, people-to-people contacts, and at the heart of it being culture and the cultural connection and cultural exchange that we have, this is again probably not a pillar, but more like a foundation. You should see it as a horizontal theme that connects all the other topics. Without cultural diplomacy, without people-to-people contacts, real political cooperation and understanding is not possible. And also, if you want to be successful in economic diplomacy, you need to involve people. You need to involve people with their heart. And that is what cultural diplomacy is about. It's the foundation of diplomacy.
Okay. Foundation of diplomacy, if I may follow it up. Talking from, because this is ambassadorial talk, I need to really ask about what happened actually at the street level. We are not talking in academic matters. So in terms of people-to-people relations, connecting people to people, cultural diplomacy as the foundation, not simply a pillar, base of cultural diplomacy. Which part of culture that you found the most important element that can connect people in Indonesia and people in Netherlands. And probably I will ask the same question based on your experience as ambassador in Sweden, in Latvia. Probably I will expect the answer will be slightly different because we are here in Indonesia are more familiar with Netherlands, but less familiar with Sweden, not so much about Latvia. So what element of culture, what element of individual relation, meaning matter the most from your experience?
My experience is that at the heart of cultural diplomacy there is respect and a genuine interest in what makes the other side tick. Where does he or she come from? What are his or her values? And that interest and that genuine trying to better understand where you're from and what you're about, where you want to go. If you get that right, and that again is cultural diplomacy, then you really get to a higher level. I already mentioned language, but when it comes to Indonesia, I think Indonesia's cultural heritage is of enormous importance because it really connects to the identity of what Indonesia is. And that also then it brings me to what you asked earlier, where does cultural repatriatie come in? I think it's exactly there. Exactly that we know how important it is for Indonesia to assert its identity, to embrace its cultural diversity in all its richness. And when there are elements missing in that cultural identity, it is our task to bring that back and to enhance Indonesia's cultural identity.
Thank you very much. I just want to add a little bit on this issue. I agree entirely with Ambassador Marcus. Another thing is historical ties. We're so close. Education, economic issue, the bilateral issue as well. And diaspora is one of the issues that my friend Ambassador of Indonesia to Den Haag, Pak Buyung Mayervas, always mentioned that I'm so happy here because 350,000 Indonesians living in the Netherlands help to strengthen relations between two countries. I think more than this number. And I agree entirely with Ambassador Mark on this issue. And since I'm a lawyer, my father told me that you have to study and also follow the discipline in the Netherlands, the Dutch system. And my subject from University of Indonesia, Faculty of Law, is strafrecht, criminal law. So on this issue, there are a lot of things that we need to work together with the system that we are having now. Even we have a continental system, European continental, but also we can also learn from Anglo-Saxon as well. And go back to repatriation, I think this is also a big achievement, and I have to thank for the government and people of the kingdom of Royal Kingdom of the Netherlands about the repatriation. I think the talks between the two ministers, foreign minister, Mr. Sugiono and also Minister Van Wel, David Van Len, was very nice. And 2 weeks earlier, before that also, the talk between King William and Pak Prabowo was very, very important for the future. Beyond this economic, political issue, but people to people, I agree with Pak Ambassador. Another thing that I think we need to learn from the Dutch is they are very creative. I like music. Pak Nenita knows exactly what I play music, classical music when I was in Beirut. No? But they are very creative here. I can mention here about the rock group name is Exception. Beginning from 80s, and also another thing is Focus from Jan Akkerman. They are very, very creative how to make a Bach music and also some music becoming easy for us to learn that issue. I think we need more communication with the artists from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The idea about music and creativity, are you willing to share with us the behind the scene story about the return of the cultural artifact?
Yeah.
The story that we never heard
Gladly.
in media.
Yes. Well, I'm not sure with the public that is very well informed. I'm not sure if I can add anything to what you already know, but I want to clarify that even though the ambassador is very kind in his way of thanking the government of the Netherlands, I don't think we deserve the credits for this. I think what this is about is to redress anomalies from the past or things that have not gone well, things that we unlawfully took collections, took artifacts, and thereby also took away part of Indonesian history, Indonesian identity, Indonesian culture. And we've kept this for decades, if not centuries, in the Netherlands. So acknowledging that this is Indonesian, belongs to Indonesia, and needs to be in Indonesia, and needs to be returned, restituted, repatriated. That is simply, I think, and the government of the Netherlands thinks, like I do, luckily, that this is the right thing to do. So it's not necessarily something we deserve credit for. It's something that is long overdue, needs to take place, but it needs to take place in a I would say, in a mutual process. And this is what we work on with the Indonesian Minister of Culture, Minister Fadlizon, and also with his great team that he has on repatriation. We have reconfirmed a process that we jointly defined about two and a half years ago, and this contains a number of steps, and I'll briefly mention them and also say why it's so important. First of all, a request, step one is a request from the Indonesian government to the Dutch government saying we would like to have this, and this piece back. Secondly, there should be provenance research. So the pieces that are requested to be returned, it's very important to have those, to document the journey these artifacts undertook, but also the context from which they were taken away. Because once that's step three, if from the provenance research it's all clear and the picture is complete, there's no longer any obstacle for actual repatriation. And why is this provenance research so important? Because simply handing over artifacts is already really important, but it's about the intangible cultural heritage that comes with it. Understanding the stories behind it, around it, the context, the documentations. Very often there is artifacts and there is archival material. That, in my view, should be seen as one integral part of what needs to be restituted. You need the stories to come with the artifacts. Well, we'll talk about maybe the Dubois collection in a minute, but artifacts can be beautiful, but sometimes these are simply bones or pieces of pottery. And it's really hard to understand what it is about unless you have the story around it. So repatriation should be both tangible and intangible repatriation.
Yeah. So it's not only about transferring goods, but it's about rebuilding history, not only for us in Indonesia, but also for you in the Netherlands, and your contribution in it is very significant. Yeah.
Absolutely, and many of these objects that are being repatriated are being researched intensively by cultural historians, by paleontologists, or what have you, whatever the artifact is about or what it is. There's a lot of research taking place. So, and very often also joint research between Indonesian and Dutch or other European researchers. So having the objects return to where they're from, to Indonesia, is one thing, but it's also important, the stories around it, and to allow researchers to continue studying these objects, because that will even uncover more stories, more understanding, more depth in what it is really about.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So everyone, we are talking about cultural diplomacy. It's not only about culture as culture that we know, as simple as that. We are talking about history, and we are talking about identity, and how dealing with object of culture is actually dealing about our history and who we are. So it's very important. Okay, shall we take question from the floor? One from lady from Kenya, and then second one of our student, and then also third. Can we go with the lady in front first? If you can be short and sharp and direct. Yes? This one.
Thank you very much. I'll be short and precise, as you said. My name is Diana Kiambuthi. I'm in charge of cultural diplomacy in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Nairobi, which is not a very old department. We are almost 10 years now. My question goes to His Excellency from Netherlands. I have seen and felt that this reparation is a phenomenon, ongoing phenomenon. And I'm just wondering, apart from the repatriation you're doing with Indonesia, are there other exercises you're doing with countries, say, in Africa? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shall we collect all three questions first? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon for His Excellency and Bapak Speaker. I am Salma. I am currently a student of International Relations in UI, and also currently doing my research on public diplomacy, especially on education diplomacy of South Korea in Indonesia, actually. I just want to ask about, because speakers mentioned about education diplomacy that Netherlands especially doing right now in Indonesia. I just want to ask about how effective is the education diplomacy that the states strategically designed for the publics in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, third one, please.
Check, okay. Firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Faik Fira Ramadan, a graduate student from Faculty of Humanities. So, right now, as a researcher from Faculty of Humanities, I'm with my colleagues, my lecturer, and Mr. Daniel. And then we're working on research about the cultural diplomacy in the Karimun Jawa archipelago. So I have been closely observing how intercultural encounters shape the community in Karimun Jawa, especially because there is a lot of people who came to Karimun Jawa to visit there, and the tourism activities has grown. And then a lot of people from Europe, especially from Netherlands. And starting this month, I have also been entrusted to work with an NGO called Kejora Karimun Jawa. It's a collaborative initiative co-created by the people from Karimun Jawa and also the Netherlands. with a shared mission of supporting the community development in the island. However, in our practice, we face a challenge that some segments of the local community, particularly those connected to educational institutions, that especially our Dutch partners, as unintentionally overshadowing or even diluting local cultural values. This creates a tension between public relations and slows the trust building process that is essential and meaningful for the educational program that we provide in Kejora Karimun Jawa. Given your extensive experience in intercultural engagement and diplomacy, what advice would you offer for strengthening the trust and the cultural sensitivity in community development initiative involving the foreign partners, especially with the Dutch people in Karimun Jawa, so that our work can grow together with the local community rather than be perceived as working over them? Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Centraling on you, Pak Mark.
Thank you very much for the different questions, and I hope I'm able to answer your questions. If you're not completely satisfied with the question or with the answer, please don't hesitate to indicate, and I'll try to do better. As for the first question, indeed, we work with several countries on repatriation. For us, this is not a bilateral thing between the Netherlands and Indonesia. This is about deconstructing colonialism. This is about trying to adopt a new attitude that takes into account the wrongdoings of the past, including, for instance, slavery and other wrongdoings. So, for instance, with Suriname, with Nigeria, with South Africa, we have already been engaged in repatriation, restitution of artifacts, of collections that were taken away in the colonial period. For instance, some of the Benin bronzes were restituted to Nigeria recently. Also, maybe good to indicate that it's more than just the return of artifacts. I already said something about this earlier, but to give a very concrete example of what we're also trying to get to terms with is, for instance, with the United States. Some time ago, we commemorated 400 years of ties with the city of New York and what came before that. Very recently as last week, we had another engagement with New York, but involving indigenous communities, because looking at New York as a city that more or less was created at some point by colonizers is not what actual cultural diplomacy should be about. It should be about the identity of the people, and especially also the people that lived there originally. So it goes back much further and should involve indigenous communities. So our ambassador for cultural diplomacy engaged in discussions with Native American tribes, indigenous communities in the state of New York, along the river, the Hudson River, to get a better dialogue than just thinking about the history that there was there with the Netherlands and New Amsterdam, as New York was called previously. So it forces us to reconsider our own history and our own role in that history, and taking a much more a broader view. I cannot give an answer to the question whether or not we are engaging in discussion with with Kenya at this moment? I assume not, otherwise you probably would be aware of it, but I'm willing to look into this and to see where we stand in this respect, because I'm sure engaging in the discussion with you will yield, even though we haven't been, right, as colonizers in Kenya, I'm sure there is ample material to talk about, or to see how we can come to a common understanding of the past and our joint future. As for the question on educational diplomacy, I hope I understood the question correctly. Specifically on educational cultural diplomacy, what we engage in as part of the whole repatriation efforts, the joint efforts with the Ministry of Culture, is also that we work on museum development, museum sciences, having exchanges between museum professionals from Indonesia with the Indonesia Heritage Agency and also with DKI Jakarta, and Dutch museums, including the Dutch Museum Academy, which is a university or a major within a university for those who want to become museum professionals. And it's not only about art history or about curating the collections, it's also about how it's also about storytelling. It's also about the business part of museum science, or the museum management, so to say. So it has a very broad range, but it's in the end about cultural educational diplomacy. If you want to take it broader, for us in this third pillar that I was talking about, which is not actually a pillar but more a horizontal foundation, educational exchange also is a key component, whether it's about scholarships, whether it's about educational exchange, whether it's about cooperation between universities, two universities, and believe me, there are like tens and tens of universities on both sides that wish to cooperate even more than they already do. So this is only question 2, I'm afraid. So very briefly on question 3, on Karimunjawa, if I were you, I would try to engage those tourists either while they are there, or if that doesn't work, you have such beauty, you have such cultural and natural beauty. I think that should be translated into a price. I would say that tourists ought to pay a tourist tax, and from that tax, the community should benefit, not just the central government or the provincial government. It should really go to the people living on the islands.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pak Mark. Before I open for the second round, question from the floor, I think I would like to also ask Pak Bagas.
Yes.
You know, question related to education diplomacy.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Can you share your experience while working as ambassador in Sweden and Latvia related to educational partnerships?
Thank you, Mbak Riris. You may recall this morning when the opening speech, Pak Hairul Hudaya, on behalf of the Director of University of Indonesia, mentioned that, that culture carries stories. And diplomacy envisages dialogue and trust. I think this must be combined also, work together side by side, living in perfect harmony. And I think this is a good story, When the President Prabowo Subianto had been warmly welcomed by King Alexander in The Hague, From that visit, a significant decision emerged that the Netherlands would return the Java man fossil from the Dubois collection. I think this decision goes beyond an archaeological exchange. And I agree with Ambassador just now. It is the future of mankind. And what makes me happy also, the follow-up, the discussion between Minister Sugiono and Mr. David at the time, didn't stop at the historical nostalgia. Their main agenda now is in the future from the plan of action 2026 to 2029, a comprehensive partnership roadmap. So I think paving the way on this issue, I think the spirit is there. So for us, not only diplomats, not only the civil servant, amtenar, but also the academicians, NGO, and agree with the ambassador, need also engage together with this from people to people. On Karimun Jawa issue, also I agree with Ambassador Mark. I think there must be some follow-up on this very issue. Because for me, the third pillar on economic or socio-cultural, if you like also, must also interested on the issue of the environment issue, environmental issue. This is the future issue. No? I think the people must also understand the future of mankind. We do have this one agreed by international community and the SDG. And this morning also we discussed about SDG, little bit from Minister Fadlizon on this issue. So empowerment is yes, but awareness also important. It is our task.
Okay.
Thank you, Mbak Riris.
Empowerment
Yes.
should go with awareness.
Correct.
Yeah, because if we empower without awareness,
Yes.
then we will grow people with not with a good heart.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Second round of question. Anyone from the floor? Okay. We go with you first, and then second, and then third. Yeah. Thank you. First question, can we have paling depan ini Mas, tolong Mas. Terima kasih. Ini, ya silakan.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am Ayu Wulandari from Department of History, Universitas Gadjah Mada. I want to ask a question to Mr. Mark Harrison. Following the recent repatriation of Indonesian cultural objects, we are grateful that repatriation is also followed by some academic support from the Netherlands, like the Netherlands Wetenschappelijk Onderzoek. They support for facilitating for the research for colonial objects, for some collection or objects with colonial context. And we are grateful that we from Department of History UGM, we have 2 ongoing consortium with some museums and also NWO for research on the Lombok treasures that looted from Cakranegara Palace in Lombok in 19th century. And the other one is research on Yap Koen's Sound Archive in the Netherlands. But sometimes repatriation is only transferring objects to the national institution in Indonesia. For example, the Lombok treasures is now only stored at the National Museum of Indonesia in Jakarta. And when it's only stored at the National Museum, it doesn't mean there's a restorative justice. And I want to ask a question that in the repatriation discussion, in the state-to-state level discussion, is there any discussion to end the coloniality of the objects itself? So it's not only stored at the National Museum of Indonesia, but it's also followed by restorative justice. And in the repatriation mechanism, is there any local communities or local voices involved there? Because when I went to Lombok, some of the Lombok peoples, for example, the descendants of Cakranegara itself, they said that they never involving in the repatriation mechanism of the Lombok treasures itself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second question, please. Ya. Bisa tolong dipas.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Anisari Datul from State University of Surabaya. My question is, since now we are in digital era, I'd like to ask to both speakers, could you give us more explanations related to the role of government, especially the embassy, in digital platform as a way of diplomacy? So the diplomacy is not only conducted directly, for example, by promoting the culture in some events, for example, like us as the students, if we work abroad or study abroad, for example, in Netherlands, but also how we can take a benefit from the digital to promote the cultures of our country. That's my first question. And the second one is how the government could guarantee if it will broaden the cultural, our culture rather than as a threat or a threat to erode the local culture in each country. So please tell me like how the government can guarantee in terms of the collaborations, for example, between government, with the influencers, or within the society, or we call it like people-to-people contact. Since I think I found that some research, the government has not maximized the digital platform to promote the culture itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, third question.
Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion this morning. I would like to ask to Pak Mark. My name is Lona Hutapea Tanasale. Actually, I am a student of graduate studies in Universitas Pajajaran. I also happen to come from Ambon, Maluku. I am sure you are quite familiar because Netherlands has a very strong presence in our region. And actually, this is not really a question, but maybe more to suggestion or request even. Because here we have also the officials from Ministry of Culture, Ibu-Ibu. I have a suggestion. Yeah, it's related to, I don't know if you're aware about papeda, slurping papeda. Papeda is culinary, traditional from Maluku, also from Papua and other regions in Indonesia. But I read some time ago that slurping papeda culture has been registered as Dutch national heritage. Yeah, I mean, it's okay because there are many Ambonese live in the Netherlands for generations already, so of course it's been practiced there. The thing is, I don't know the plan of Dutch government, if it will be registered to UNESCO as cultural heritage. If it's the case, maybe I suggest to Indonesia to join the, join the subscription. Maybe we can do the joint subscription of Indonesia and Netherlands together, because if Indonesia itself, Indonesia has already so many cultures that are in line, waiting to be subscribed to UNESCO. So I just want to suggest for slurping papeda, maybe we can have the joint subscription with the Netherlands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we talk culture and we talk high politics. Yeah. So 3 questions, one from Jogja, one from Surabaya, one from Bandung. This forum is incredible. Can I invite Pak Bagas to answer the question first, to give Pak Mark some time to.
Certainly, thank you very much. Very nice. I think this is a good question. It's not question, I think sharing some information, and some of us sometimes also always asking, what is the role of a community? What is the role of the government? I think it's a good thing for us to discuss on this issue. I think the local community must also be empowered on this issue. Karimun Jawa we discussed already. I can add also, the government, the local government of Bukit Tinggi, Kabupaten Agam in west of Sumatra also knows about this issue, about Fort de Kock. This is benteng, yeah, di Bukit Tinggi. It's very famous. Another thing is, since I'm from Yogyakarta, also mentioned how the Kraton itself also always empower the people to know exactly what is the cultural history about this one. And again, this is not only government itself, but also with the collaboration with the NGOs, academicians, and also our partners, international partners, UNESCO as well. And I think this will be successful in the future. Another thing is the role of government and media, social media. Yes, now we are in the current situation where I think in Indonesia, now a lot of social media mentioned about 1, 2, 3, 4, but which one is true, which one is false? I think everyone should also understand. So the collaboration between the government, the NGO, and also the local people plus academician must also important for this. And I think whenever we discuss, not only with the government of the Netherlands, but also other government, I think we have to build trust and influence in the future. I'm so happy that my father told me at the time, when you are a lawyer, also follow the discipline from the Dutch law, must also be there. I mentioned this one also to second daughter, and she was graduated from University of Amsterdam. So we are so happy on this issue. I think this is only my answer on this issue. Thank you very much.
Okay. So digital diplomacy is something that really we need to engage with. No option. Okay. Thank you, Pak Bagas. Pak Mark.
Thank you very much. Three very good and interesting questions. On the one from Yogyakarta, UGM. First of all, my compliments for the way you pronounce Dutch. For instance, my last name, Gerritsen. It's not easy to pronounce, but you nailed it. Summarizing your question is, shouldn't artifacts that have been restituted be on display or given to the communities where they were from originally? And that is a question that is an Indonesian discussion and should be, or this discussion should be held within Indonesia between the central government and the communities. So we are not part of that discussion. Indeed, as you said, the process that has been defined is a G to G, a government to government, a state to state process. I think it's unbecoming and would not be justified for the Netherlands to say, well, you can have it back, but you need to do this and this. You have to do it, to bring it there, etc. Right? This is not up to us. This is really up to Indonesia. And it's important for this debate to take place. I see the importance of having local voices be heard, having communities express themselves, because it's also about their identity. I would add that what I said earlier on museum training, we try to expand this program to regional and local museums to give museum professionals in the whole country the tools, the opportunities, the qualifications to manage collections. But then again, it's up to Indonesians themselves to determine where collections should be held. Secondly, the question from Surabaya. Indeed, we live in a digital era, and whatever we can do to stimulate dialogue through digital means is very important. But I can also be more specific. Some of you mentioned archives and the importance also of opening up archives, making them available, making them accessible for vast audiences. And here we can distinguish archives from cultural artifacts. Cultural artifacts clearly stem or originate from a certain community and need to be there where they are from. But archives often is more difficult. For instance, if someone writes a letter to someone else, so a 19th century, or for instance the letters that Cartini wrote, right? She wrote them, sent them to Mr. Abendanon and others. And I would argue they belong in Indonesia. She's a national hero and she's part of. At the same time, if you are looking at archives of the East India Company, they are stored here at the Archive National. Kilometers of archives are there. But they were made by Dutch. So you could argue they need to be, they belong to the Netherlands and they need to be brought back to the Netherlands. Well, I don't think this is, apart from what is just, it's also not feasible. And I don't think we should try to determine where should the archive be, etc., who owns it. No, it's here, it belongs to Indonesia, but by digitalizing it, it becomes accessible to researchers and to anyone who's interested. So with archives, I think digitalization is the key instead of repatriation or restitution to whoever claims it belongs to. Because archives are always, especially when it's about letters and communication, there are always two sides to communication. So is the receiver or the sender the owner of that information? Well, I think it's both. And again, digitalization is key to tackle that important, complex, but also interesting issue. And then thirdly, yes, we have a very strong connection to Ambon. I really thank you for that question and also for putting the spotlight on that. We have recently, because of this connection to Ambon and to the Maluku Islands, opened a consulate in Ambon to be better able to address issues of common interest. Many Dutch people now who have Moluccan roots come back after 2 or 3 generations, having lived in the Netherlands, come back to Ambon to retire, or at least spend part of the year there and part of the year. I can fully imagine, because in winter in Dutch winter you'd rather be in Ambon than in the Netherlands. So, and also one very important thing that connects us is football. So the Netherlands qualified for the World Cup yesterday.
Yes, yesterday.
We're really relieved because you never know what happens. And I'm really sorry and sad that Indonesia was unable to qualify. I really hope that for the next World Cup it will be possible. But I'm intending to go to Ambon during a game of the Netherlands, playing against whatever team on the World Cup stage, and to watch it together with people from Ambon, knowing that they're even stauncher supporters of the Dutch football team than we in the Netherlands are ourselves. But when it comes to your question, I think it's an excellent idea to explore when there is joint or common heritage, and we want to have it inscribed in the UNESCO Intangible Heritage List, or the Culinary Heritage List. I don't know exactly what this would qualify for. To investigate whether this is something we could work on jointly. I don't know the background, so I'm afraid I cannot go into this particular case. But in general, I think also we have engaged in joint requests for enlisting in cultural heritage. I think with the Cartini letters recently, a joint request was made and it was granted by UNESCO. So that example maybe can be followed if this particular tradition applies to the criteria of UNESCO. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. By the way, Netherlands qualified for the World Cup because of Liverpool's Virgil van Dijk.
But also in the past we have had excellent players, also from Indonesia, like Giovanni van Bronckhorst. And my favorite, when I was a young boy, was actually from Maluku, Simon Tahamata.
Yeah, yes.
And he's now a scout for the Timnas Indonesia.
Wow. Okay, 12:51. I think I can have 2 more questions. I can take 2 more questions. Anyone? 1? And then 2. Yes. The third one will be for me. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. My name is Nico. I am from Jakarta. I work with a community of pipe organists, the player of pipe organ in conserving pipe organs. Most of the available pipe organs in Indonesia here is legacy from Dutch colonial. One of interesting aspects in cultural relations could be the presence and the opportunity on working together on Dutch colonial legacies here in Indonesia. For example, the pipe organ we are working with Emmanuel Church in Gambir, Jakarta Pusat, that currently reached the age of 180 years. And Sion Church in Kota Tua reached, based on our research with experts also from the Netherlands, reached 300 years old of the musical instrument, could be the oldest musical instrument in Indonesia currently. What do you think on this, especially for the Mr. Ambassador, on cultural diplomacy and working together on the collaboration with the Dutch legacies here in Indonesia? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Second one.
Greetings, I'm Sadam from Universitas Indonesia. It is an honor to speak with the honorable speakers. So I have a community that is active in the field of urban history in the outskirts of Jakarta under the guidance of history professor Zefri Alkatiri of Universitas Indonesia. In one of our projects, we discover a piece of history that is closely related and very important to the Netherlands culture and national history, namely the cultuurstelsel or cultivation system initiated by Governor General Van den Bosch, which saved the Dutch economy in the 19th century. At our research site, we found the house of Governor General Van den Bosch, where he got the inspiration for the cultuurstelsel. We already confirmed this by communicating with one of the researchers from the Netherlands, author of Van den Bosch biography. Her name is Angeli Sands. The condition of the house itself is still well preserved and authentic in old Lanhuis style, but because not many people know the story behind it yet, so the status has not yet been designated as a cultural heritage site. Our community itself only discovered this fact at the beginning of this year. The area itself has developed into a crowded urban area, but the name that symbolizes the area as the center of the cultuurstelsel has not changed, namely Pondok Aren and Pondok Kacang. Based on the realities that I presented, it is clear that the historical narrative regarding cultural interactions between the Netherlands and Indonesia continues to develop in such a positive and progressive manner. So if we're talking about the rich cultural and historic relation between Netherlands and Indonesia, repatriation is not the only things that happening. New narrative, new history, finding are also emerging, which I believe can also strengthen our relation, the relation between the Netherlands and Indonesia in the present and the future. So how does the speaker, especially Mr. Ambassador, respond to this phenomenon? Since from what I know, Mr. Ambassador also have a strong background in history. Thank you very much.
He checks your background. Background checking. Thank you. Pamar, Mike.
Thank you. Both questions touch upon my personal interest also. As a Dutchman, I like to cycle. I like to ride my bike, and I use this to explore Jakarta. Every Saturday or Sunday with a friend, we take our bikes and we go around Jakarta. We go to Kota Tua. Yesterday or Sunday I was at Tanjung Priok, the old train station from the 19th century. It's a very good, still in very good shape. And we go to different places. I have not yet been to Sion Church, and I have seen several pictures of the pipe organ and the historic musical instrument there, and that really triggers me. I want to go there because it's amazing what is preserved. And I'll definitely come and visit and try to find ways to help you preserve it. But what I really appreciated, I've been here now for about 1 year, a bit over 1 year. I feel that Indonesia is in the process of rediscovering that part of its history, or that it's actually, I should say it differently, that it's realizing that it's also part of Indonesian history. Yes, it is Dutch colonial history, but Indonesians seemed more and more to say, all right, this is also part of where we come from, and actually we should see this more as something that is a fact, but also something we can build on. And a very concrete example is that more and more houses, for instance, in Menteng and in other areas from that from the colonial era, are turned into hip coffee bars, or into restaurants, or into wedding locations, or into small museums or boutique hotels. So that development I find very interesting. Why? Because it's trying to give a new destination and a new meaning to that part of their history. So of our connected history, and which includes Indonesia to realize that this can be an asset. You can make economic use of it. You can preserve that part of the history. And I think that's also something we see in other places, not only in Jakarta. I get sometimes contacted by municipalities, by mayors from, it was recently from, I think, both from Sumatra, one from Palembang. The mayor contacted me because they had discovered behind the wall, they had discovered a beautiful mural from colonial times. And also, I think in Bukit Tinggi, which you mentioned, there is a beautiful also clock tower which is well preserved, and we're really happy that Indonesians are looking after this and are doing this. What we try to do to stimulate this, to encourage this, but also to jointly undertake this, is again, it's about educational diplomacy, which is very close to cultural diplomacy. So what we are envisioning is, and something we want to launch next year, is a professional exchange program of young professionals from Indonesia who work, for instance, with the heritage department of a municipality, or an architectural school, or renovation professionals, to visit the Netherlands for a couple of weeks, and not just to go around, but to work actually for in an exchange format at the Dutch Heritage Agency or the municipality of a city that has a lot of heritage, and to see and exchange and learn from each other on how to preserve heritage, not only to keep it as it was, but to tell the stories around it, and to give it new, fill it with new meaning, so that it becomes something future-oriented, rather than just dwelling on the past, looking at it through a nostalgia lens. I think that is something we should try to avoid. I think it's all about looking at, knowing what we come from, joining forces to use that as an asset for the future.
Thank you so much. Very nice. Thank you so much. Pak Bagas, you
Boleh
have
satu menit aja ya.
Sure.
Thank
I
you,
know
Mas.
time is up,
I'm so
but I'm
sorry.
the moderator.
Yes, sir. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Don't worry.
Okay. I think we do have a close relationship, Indonesia and the Netherlands. There are several reasons on this issue. The first is historical ties. Many Dutch people have family or ancestors who live in Indonesia, giving them emotional connection to this country. And number two is the tourism. You know? Many Dutch people arrive here, and we are so happy. And Indonesian diaspora as well in the Netherlands, as you just mentioned. Another thing that I agree with Ambassador is a professional exchange program. I think we must have this one. Because the architect in the world is in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
The issue of water management for is very important.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So we'll be waiting.
Indeed, we have it in the water sector, and we want to copy that to the heritage sector.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so to conclude the session, one last question. Can diplomacy between states go without cultural diplomacy? Pak Mark and then Pak Bagas.
I think we're running out of time, so I'm just going to say no.
Without explanation?
Well, of course, there's a lot to say be said about it, but I really think that maybe without culture you can be successful for a couple of efforts and maybe for a couple of years. But if you're really in it for the long run, and I think Indonesia and the Netherlands are for it. I mean, we have a connected history that goes back 350 or almost 400 years, more than 400 years. We want to do that. We want to continue being partners for the next 400 years and do it right? Don't make the mistakes we made in the past. But if you want to be in it for the long run, you need culture and people-to-people connections to make it work.
Thank you, nicely put. Pak Bagas?
Update ya, mesti selesai, update selesai. Terima kasih. Tapi stakeholder penting loh, 3 elemen tadi itu, government, kemudian juga academicians, NGO as well. So we work very, very close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So everyone, we cannot do diplomacy without cultural diplomacy. So be proud of our culture, be proud of our identity, be proud of who we are now, to preserve our future. Thank you so much, Ambassador Mark Gerritson, Ambassador Bagas Hapsoro, and thank you so much for all the question and attention from the floor. Again, one last time, big applause for everyone, for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Our Excellencies and Baredis. We invite you to take a picture together on the center stage. All right, picture in 3, 2, 1. Wonderful. Let's once more give a big round of applause to our ambassadors and Ibu Algana Solution Regional Iiccd as our moderator for the special ambassadorial talks. Ladies and gentlemen, it has certainly been a substantial morning for all of us.